This book, Adventures, is the third part of the autobiography trilogy, Baby Boomer Ross. The trilogy follows the life journey of Ross Taylor, born in Australia, 1947, as part of the baby boomer generation. The first and second parts of his recollections cover the areas of education, working life, marriage, family, and ministry, whereas this book, Adventures, is taken from journal trips with good mates into the wilds of the Australian countryside. The first adventure was back in 1971, to find a way to the top of Mt Dalrymple, located near Mackay, from the western side. The 2015 adventure was a boat trip down the Murray River that forms the border between Victoria and New South Wales, and later in 2019, a trip to the tip of Australia, Cape York. The final adventure was 2 weeks on Fraser and Bribie Islands, located just offshore and north of Brisbane. Adventure, an unusual and exciting or daring experience.
The adventures. What is it with humans that lures us to climb mountains, navigate rivers, discover continents, plumb the depths of the oceans, and walk the moon? It separates us from animals. No cow wants to build a veterinary hospital or an ape write a book to pass on knowledge to another generation. I believe humans have been created with the thumbprint of their creator embedded within, to push boundaries, to go where no man has gone before, to search out and create new things, whether it be vaccinations, medicines, electrical devices, planes, trains and automobiles, reading, writing and arithmetic. We desire to seek and find. Even greater things than this shall we do. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon made this statement: it is God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them. You can find that in Proverbs 25 verse 2. Anyhow, I'm a baby boomer and I enjoy discovering things, finding out how things work and why. I'll search everywhere to at least get a thumbprint understanding of the place, person or subject. Where did superglue come from? And what about making of the atomic bomb? How are jet engines made? And where are we going with nuclear fusion generators? Anyhow, some years ago I was leading a midweek Bible study group, and inevitably someone would ask how something or other was discovered or made, and we would deviate into pooling our knowledge base. Anyhow, the group was mostly older people like me, except for one young girl, well, 20-ish, who would listen intently. Someone asked her why she chose to come each week, considering there were young adult groups she could join. Without hesitation, she responded, "I love it. It's like Discovery Channel. I learn heaps. It's a new adventure every night." I smiled and thought to myself, a girl after my own heart, a thirst for knowledge and adventure. Now, in previous chapters, I wrote about some of my adventures: the boat trip down the top end of the Brisbane River as a teenager, the climb up Mount Kosciuszko while living in Bega, and alluded to a dozen others. However, I have chosen 4 to write about in this book: Mt Dalrymple, and it's called Try West, Young Man; Murray River, and it's called Murray Mischief; Cape York trip, and it's the Great Escape; and Fraser and Bribie Island. It's called 2 Men, 2 Islands and 2 Weeks. Now, Mt Dalrymple happened way back in 1971, and my writings come from my memory. That's a worry right there. For the others, I kept a journal, and as a result, I write in a style called historical present, where I slip from past to present tense. This allows me to tell a story with added vividness to the events. And my wife Diane is my editor, and she gets what I'm trying to do. But my sister Annette, who picks up on all the punctuation and spelling errors, is driven crazy by the shifting. She'll get over it. Anyhow, come on the journey with me, and let's enjoy these 4 adventures together.
This first adventure was in 1971 on Mt Dalrymple and entitled Try West, Young Man.
The geography around Mackay in North Queensland screams at you of a tumultuous past, possibly thousands of years ago in Noah's time, when the global flood covered the earth and the land masses we know today pushed their way above the waters, with violent eruptions and tremendous erosion occurred as the waters receded. The resulting hills and valleys are now covered in lush vegetation and make for the picturesque vista that we enjoy today. Mount Oscar in North Mackay is really just a hill at 50 metres and is the rotary lookout for the town. And Black Mountain out near Farley is a little higher. Then further north toward Cuttable you find Mount Blackwood at 640 metres, where we built the television transmitters mentioned in a previous book. And if you climb the tower, you realise that you are looking down into an extinct volcano crater with Mount Ossa, not Mount Oscar, Mount Ossa as the cooled granite plug. Now, flying over in a plane, the Mount Ossa Valley looks like a giant Mexican sombrero with Mount Blackwood on the brim and Mount Ossa at the centre. Now, the city of Mackay is divided into north and south by the Pioneer River that flows down the Pioneer Valley. The headwaters begin way up in the Pinnacle and Clark Ranges, 120 kilometres to the west. Now, the Clark Range has a few dominant peaks, Mount William at 1,270 metres, Mount David and Mt Dalrymple around 1,250. Well, depending on who you believe for elevations. Mt Dalrymple, in fact, was named after Gregory Dalrymple, who explored the large area of the Burdekin and Herbert rivers. And the mountain offers a spectacular view down the Pioneer Valley with Mackay on the horizon some 60 kilometres away. Now, in 1971, one of my workmates, Bob Sullivan, came to me and said, "Hey Ross, are you up for an adventure? A couple of us are keen to find a walking track onto Mt Dalrymple from the western side." I'm 23 and fit as a mallee bull and only too willing. Turns out the other blokes were Merv McCubbin, another technician and ex-World War II RAF navigator, and Rob Stevenson, a cane farmer, both in their 50s. So the four of us get together and pore over the ageing contour maps made back in the 1940s, so they're not that accurate, as I think they had been made from aerial observations only. Fortunately, Merv and Rob had some stereoscopic photos along with a viewer that made the ridgelines and valleys really stand out. Now, at this time, bushwalkers made their way up the mountain from Finch Hatton Gorge on the eastern side, and it was a gruelling 1,200 metre climb over 6 kilometres. So if we could find an approach from the western side, it would only be a 750 metre rise stretched out over 8 kilometres. Sounds like a walk in the park, says an inexperienced me. The others just turn and look at me with knowing smiles. You see, they'd already spied out the land a little by visiting the farmer at the end of Dalrymple Road and quizzed him on his knowledge of the scrub. His farm, in fact, would become our base camp to get to the summit and back in one day, and it would require an early start. Okay, Saturday, 4 a.m, and I pick up Bob and Merv in Mackay and set off on Highway 64. That's the Mackay-Youngler Road, out through Marion and collect Rob at his farm. The first glow of dawn shows itself as my old E.H. Holden grinds up the steep mountain road to the town of Youngler. A right turn down Cummings Street and we join Dalrymple Road and follow the 20-kilometre gravel to our base camp farm. Now, we started calling it the base camp because, after all, we're climbing a mountain. You've got to have a base camp, right? It's crisp and cold up in the mountains as we toss our packs on and head out through the wire. We're travelling light, with a bit of lunch, first aid kit, insect repellent to discourage the ticks and leeches, a couple of machetes, military compass, maps, pink ribbons. A water bottle each is sufficient because we can confident of little creeks on the way. The pink ribbons are our blaze markers rather than the old traditional way of cutting notches in trees, etc. The notches are more permanent but sometimes harder to see, and if you need to retract and change course because of obstacles, it's a lot easier to remove a ribbon and relocate as needed. Once we had the track worked out, we could come back and blaze more permanent marks by notching on both sides of a tree for coming and going. Actually, I don't think the national parks people like you marking the trees these days, probably back then either. Whoops. Anyhow, we'd planned a likely route using the maps and established waypoints and compass bearings weeks ago. But the old saying is true about planning an operation. No plan of operation extends with certainty beyond the first encounter with the enemy. Our enemy was the terrain and vegetation. Now, dead reckoning was not going to get us there because of deep ravines and large rock formations. So a good plan was to try and follow the ridge lines where possible. Somehow I was tasked with the job of navigating with the compass and pace counting for distance. I outsourced the counting to others as a backup. Remember, this is years before GPS navigation was even dreamed of, and the sun and other landmarks were almost invisible down on the rainforest floor. Some people think that all you have to do is look at the compass reading and follow your nose. Unfortunately, that does not correct side drift. You could end up totally missing a waypoint by metres. Anyhow, the process I used was to shoot a line as far as I could see. In thick forest, that may be only about 20 metres. Noting a rock or a tree, then move to that point and shoot again. Now, in open country where you can see 200 or 300 metres, that works pretty well. But in rainforests where every tree looks the same, and if you take your eyes off the target to avoid a giant spider's web or wait a while vine, you look up and you've lost your tree. So my method was to put a man up ahead as far as I could see, then position him as my marker. He stands there until I could get to him. Then he moves forward, and we repeat the process, a bit like a caterpillar moving tail to head, etc. I'm sure you get the idea. Anyhow, this was very good for getting around obstacles like creeks or large boulder formations, and kept us on course. Several times we were stopped by very deep, narrow gullies, other times by large boulders or rock outcrops. Wait a while vine, also known as lawyer vine, is a climbing palm and very sharp and nasty hooks all along its stem. I've seen a trail bike rider rip from his bike by being snagged on the vine. Once caught in the backward-facing thorns, you have to wait a while to untangle yourself and stop the bleeding. Bob tells me you can use the vines to make very nice cane furniture. He's a wealth of knowledge, isn't he? Anyhow, I can't recall us coming across the notorious stinging gimpy trees, thank goodness. Leeches loved us, those blood-sucking little mongrels. You probably guessed it, I don't like them, but salt was their kryptonite, and the old army insect repellent with DEET kept them away. Don't ever let that stuff get on your plastic things like watch glass or airbeds, it'll dissolve them. I can hear my organic fluoride and chlorine banning anti-GMF and non-chemical friends protesting loudly about DEET, D-E-E-T, but it works. Just after midday we reached the summit. As I remember, the summit consists of huge boulders of lichen-covered granite that protrude through the jungle canopy. The boulders are about the size of a large house and easily accessible from the western side, and they make a great viewing platform. There are obviously no guardrails to block your view all the way down to the Finch Hatton Gorge and beyond, so as you sit down for lunch, it's a bit like your view across an infinite pool. It just drops off. Anyhow, we enjoy a bit of tucker and go easy on the water because the last few clicks were pretty dry. And as the sweat has dried from our clothes, Bob pipes up, "Come on, you guys, we need to get moving if we're going to get back before dark." Anyhow, the group of us worked well together. There was no designated leader with a badge, but Merv McCubbin was probably the unspoken leader, then Rob Stevenson, followed by Bob Sullivan, and me, being the youngest and last to join the group, simply tagged along. Now, we all had our bit to contribute, and that made for an expanded situational awareness. I look back and we automatically practiced crew resource management, CRM, and it's also known as cockpit resource management. We're way ahead of our times because it wouldn't be until 1979 that the name was coined by NASA psychologist John Lober, who for several years had studied communication processes in cockpits. And while retaining a command of hierarchy, the concept was intended to foster a less authoritarian cockpit culture in which co-pilots are encouraged to question captains if they observe them making mistakes. Good old Wikipedia. Anyhow, every management course of good repute should talk about the advantages of CRM. Anyhow, dark envelops you a lot quicker in the jungle, and before we know it, we are pushing to get back to base camp. Just as we're about to cross the wire back into base camp, Rob notices that he's lost his jacket. He can remember seeing it at the last creek crossing and is pretty sure that's where it is and is determined to retrieve it. Bob pipes up and says, "You can't go alone, mate, I'll come with you." And off they go, and Merv and I wait at the car. Half an hour, then 3/4, still no Rob and Bob. By now it's almost dark, and where we were in the open paddock, it must almost be black inside the scrub. Anyhow, Bob tells us later that it was so dark that they were feeling each tree with their fingers to try and find either a blaze, notch or ribbon. Anyhow, the farmer wanders over, and together we share our concerns and begin to strategise on a search and rescue mission. "I'll go and turn the house lights on so they have a reference point," says Farmer Brown. Actually, I've forgotten his name. And off he goes while Merv and I take turns to shout cooee, the old Australian bush calling signal. Anyhow, back in the jungle, Bob and Rob are seriously considering stopping for the night before they get totally lost, but come to the decision that if they can just push on uphill, they must get to a cleared farmland area. It's about then they catch a glimpse of the farmhouse lights through the foliage and hear the distant cooees giving hope and direction. Good one, Farmer Brown. Anyhow, a few minutes later, the two figures of Bob and Rob appear out of the now dark jungle and are very grateful for the lights of the farmhouse. I actually often use this story as an illustration how the Bible gives us hope and direction. Psalm 119 and verse 105 says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light for my path."
A month or so later.
Anyhow, over the following weeks, we talk about our next trip and where we can improve the route and mark it more clearly. So October 1971, we're at it again, this time to camp on the top overnight, and if we have time, to slip across the ridge to Mt David. We did have time to climb the pointy rock on top of Mt David, and having taken our time to enjoy the walk, we made it to Mt Dalrymple by about 3 p.m. Decision time. Do we camp on top of the rock or down at the base? Now, if it's windy and rainy, the best place would be to shelter at the base on the western side. The weather was beautiful and a moon could be expected later in the night, so we decided on top. I suppose another factor was the huge, biggest I'd ever seen actually, brown snake we saw slithering around the base area as we did our recce of the place. That was not an inviting sign. Tying our hoochie down to the rock was not easy, but large clumps of orchids growing in the cracks gave us something to tie to. We didn't have any of the fancy tents that hikers carry today. All we had was our army hoochies. On the eastern side, the rock drops off hundreds of feet, and on the western side, it looks fine, but what you see is actually the tops of the jungle canopy, and there is still a nasty drop of many feet. Now, to ensure that no one wandered off the edge during the night, during nocturnal watering breaks, we ran a white tape around the perimeter as a safety measure. Anyhow, roll call in the morning showed it was effective. We still had 4 people. Anyhow, the sun peaked above the horizon briefly, but then the misty clouds rose and obscured our view until about 9 a.m. And as it cleared, the view down the Pioneer Valley opened up to us. Now, Rob had arranged for his wife to shine a mirror from his farmhouse 30 kilometres away at exactly 10 a.m. And I had my old telescope set up and was peering in the general direction when all of a sudden an enormous bright flash hit me. It looked like the whole house was illuminated. She had taken the mirror that was about 1/2 metre square off the bedroom Duchess and was standing in the yard reflecting sunlight in our direction. I had no idea it would be so effective. I'd done the exercise over a kilometre, but never this distance. Wow. Anyhow, mine was a small 100mm shaving mirror. She said later it looked much larger than she expected and described it as a bit like a lighthouse beacon. Once again, a lot of my friends have the wrong drum when it comes to signalling with a mirror. The movies usually show someone wobbling a mirror or shiny object and hoping for the best. I like to use a front sight and get the aim right. On Dalrymple, I got Bob to stand in front of me by a few metres with his back towards me, roughly in line with where I thought Rob's farm should be. He stands with his back towards me so the reflected sunbeam doesn't fry his eyes. Then with the mirror up near my nose, I can look over the mirror and see the projected spot on his back, then move it off onto the target. I am basically looking right along the sunbeam. A tree, rock, or even an extended hand will suffice if you don't have a bob available, as long as it forms a front sight for you. I've been told proper signalling mirrors have a sighting hole in the centre for you to even get a better aim. Anyhow, I had attached a small aluminium plaque on the rock with our names on it, and I thought it had disappeared. However, just the other day, I did a search on good old Google looking for Mt Dalrymple via the Western Track. Lo and behold, up pops Townsville Hike and Explore Club with a comment about a small plaque on top. I grabbed my phone and called Michael Hughes, the contract's name on the website, and he tells me they made it to the top in December 2021. And the plaque is still there. How about that? Best of all, the track shown on the walking map today seems very close to the one we blazed. Happy trails. You know, a trailblazer is a person who makes a new track through wild country. Yep, that was us.
This is the end of Try West Young Man. The second adventure was in 2015 on the Murray River. Ross Taylor and Gordon Ling travelled by boat from Yarrawonga to Echuca, and the story is called Murray Mischief.
Well, Sunday morning church service of the 11th of October 2015 went well. Once again, I really enjoyed preaching and the response of the congregation was positive as always. By 12:30, Gordon and I were connecting the trailer to the big blue bus, also known as Gordon's motorhome. Our wives took photos and smiled with a grin that said, "Just look at these two grown men acting like teenagers." I nodded at the knowing glances with silent agreement, as I thought they were probably right. Anyhow, moments later, the big Mercedes diesel rattled into life, the air brakes charged, the gears grated, the wheels turned, and we rolled out of Bega. Now, the climb up Brown Mountain was very, very slow, but beautiful. Two excited men sitting in the front seat of that Mercedes bus realised their dream to traverse the Murray had begun. Now, a couple of years ago, I stopped at Albury for the night and late in the afternoon stood on the banks of the Murray River for the very first time in my life. Somehow, the adventure of travelling the length of this great river grabbed my attention. I said to my wife, before I kick the bucket, I want to get in a boat with one of my mates and travel from here to the mouth of this river. Do you ever open your mouth and make a statement that you haven't really thought about or weighed up the cost in time and effort? Anyhow, sometime later, about March I think it was of 2015, I repeated the wish in front of my congregation. Later, one of the members, Gordon Ling, came to me and said, "Ross, let me give you a book written by a man who has done exactly what you are talking about, along with some of the charts of the river." Anyhow, by that afternoon, and having only read the first chapter, I realised what a gigantic task this would be. Firstly, the Murray is about 2,500 kilometres long, and secondly, the logistics are quite extraordinary for such a journey. Time, fuel, food, communications and support. Anyhow, Gordon and I shared our passion to do the trip. He had the boat and most of the gear, so we began to plan the first trip. Now, we soon decided to try a relatively short one-week trip from Yarrawonga to Echuca, which is about 275 kilometres by river. We estimated we needed to do 60 kilometres a day, and then we could probably do it in 4.5 days. Anyhow, this outcome required leaving just below the weir at Yarrawonga on Monday morning and arriving in Echuca around Friday lunch. Now, if we achieved this, we would be there in time to clean up and catch the 3:30 coach back to the commencement point to collect our bus and trailer. The next thing we agreed on was that we would take our time to enjoy the journey, not to be rushed and travel at about canoe speed. Although the boat had a 50-horse motor on the back, we decided to use the 8-horsepower auxiliary at speeds of about 10 or 12 kilometres an hour when travelling with the current. This was also a great way to conserve fuel. Now, in planning the trip, we actually had no idea of the fuel consumption of this little 8 horsepower pushing the 16-foot fiberglass half cabin. So one Sunday afternoon we did a test run on the Bega River, filled the little 10-litre tank, drove the boat for about 2 hours. During that time, by the way, a number of people were convinced we'd broken down when they saw us with the 50 horsepower lifted up and the little auxiliary screaming away. Actually, we ran it at about 3/4 throttle, very comfortable. Anyhow, from that test run, we knew it would give us about 50 kilometres per full tank. Anyhow, the auxiliary motor, though, is pretty small, and it's tucked away with only the throttle arm for steering. So we tried a few extension ideas, finally settling on a rigid PVC water pipe that fitted beautifully and allowed the operator to stand and see where he was going, control the throttle and steer all at the same time. Great. So here we are, loaded with fuel, water, maps, radios, flares, emergency beacons, first aid kits, camping gear, and a motor extension arm. We're ready to go. Now, once at the top of Brown Mountain, we cruised comfortably along, grabbing the mandatory coffee at Nimitable. Then further down the track, Cooma passed unnoticed. We climbed our way up over the Snowy Mountains Highway. No snow or ice at this time of the year. In fact, it was unusually warm as we passed through Tumut and out onto the Hume Highway. Now, with double lanes and the 110 km/h speed limit, we wound the big blue bus and trailer to flat out at 100 clicks an hour. The truckies called us the Blue Bus and Trailer on their CBs as they surged by. Anyhow, the name sort of stuck with us. Huge dark thunderclouds gathered in the west, threatening to close in on us at any minute. Fortunately, we ran parallel to the lightning-charged storms and continued skirting them to the south around Albury. Our nighttime showed we definitely needed better lights on the bus and made a vow that fixing them would be our first priority when we got back home. Anyhow, about 9:30, just east of Yarrawonga, we diverted off the Murray Valley Highway down some dirt road in the middle of nowhere to eventually find Lake Mudamere. Now, this would be our sleeping spot for Sunday night. It's basically a freshwater lake off the Murray where Gordon had been years ago. The name means waterhole that never dries up. Now, no one else was camping there, just a toilet block and a few acres of open mowed grass. Well, silence filled the air as the diesel shut down, and after a brief walk around the rig, we slipped into the bus's bunks. The patter of a dozen spots of rain on the roof and the distant rumble of thunder. And the Sandman got me.
Monday, the 12th of October.
Somewhere in the early hours of the morning, I gently awoke with the view of 1,000 stars filling the night sky. The distant thunder and lightning strikes of the hours before had vanished. From the windows of the bus I could see the soft glow of remote towns to the east along the Murray. Maybe Corowa or Howlong. Anyhow, a few feet away I could hear the soft snoring of my co-adventurer as he rolled over. "Hey, you awake?" I asked. "Yeah," came the reply. "Any idea of time?" Click. Torchlight lit his watch. "Oh, around 2:30. "No. Time I checked if the grass needed watering." "Yeah, me too." Anyhow, outside the air was crisp and quiet. No mosquitoes, only a moth or two. Back in bed, I had 100 poetic and descriptive verses running through my head and wondered if I would remember them later in the morning. No such luck. Next thing I knew was the silhouettes of trees and objects outside were gradually changing from two-dimensional to three as the sun's glow began to rise somewhere on the eastern horizon. The chatter of birds beckoned me to check out the grass once more. Now, Lake Mudamere surprised me with its sandy shores and signs of camping areas with a boat ramp and a rowing club. Apparently, a rowing regatta is held there each January, and they've been doing so since 1863. It's the oldest such event in Australia. We were the only ones at the camp. It was already 6:30 on the morning of the first day. Time we head west to Yarrawonga for breakfast. Well, with good old Macca's coffee, hash brown and bacon and egg burger stashed away, we headed for the caravan park and boat ramp. In a few moments we were unloaded and in the water with what seemed like a ton of gear packed into the boat. Food, water, petrol, sleeping gear, tents, all the first aid essentials, and with the bus and trailer safely stashed away in a secure area at the caravan park for a small fee. By the way, the caravan park girl was unimpressed. This was something she'd seen hundreds of times before. A couple of stupid old buggers trying out the Murray. Ho-hum. Anyhow, we met an older, maybe 70-something guy in a canoe just leaving before us. He said he was travelling the full length of the Murray over the next few weeks and we'd probably pass him later on downstream. Anyhow, by 10 a.m, saw us sliding away from the boat ramp, only 100 metres from the Yarrawonga Weir. Plenty of water tumbling over the weir, so there'd be a good level in the river. I started out with a coat on, but as the day temperature quickly rose, that'd be stowed away, and we slipped along at an impressive speed of about 8 or 10 kilometres an hour. Campers all along the various camping sites looked relaxed, sitting under their annexes in camp chairs while drinking tea and coffee. They usually looked up from the book in their hands and waved as we moved by. Sandy banks looked beautiful, but there were lots of snags poking out, just inches out of the water. Made me wonder what was inches just under the water. Just after midday, we passed the old guy in the canoe. Amazed how fast he could travel. He paddled using his arms in the morning and using his legs on underwater paddles in the afternoon. After a bit of a yarn, we continued downstream looking for a nice beach landing spot for lunch. Now comes the fun part, finding our supplies. Hey, where did you put the coffee, I hear? No idea's the reply. And so the list went on for sugar, cups, spoons, tin fruit, all with similar answers. Anyhow, cool change swept through, even got my coat on again. I thought we might get a shower of rain, but no, the sun came out by 1:30 and we're on our way. Now the river's probably about 100 metres wide with beautifully changing landscapes. The water is quite clean and you could probably drink it if you had to. However, we were well stocked with bottled water. The maps we had were very accurate. They were originally drawn up by Barry and Maureen Wright back in 1975, but rechecked in the 2000s. It's published by Murray River Charts and shows every bend, bank, creek, beach, snaggy area, along with houses, shacks, pumps, bridges, towns, as well as distance markers that showed kilometres from somewhere near the mouth of South Australia. Anyhow, according to the distance markers, we were going at about 10 or 12 kilometres every hour, and that 10-litre fuel tank would last us 50 kilometres. The good old 8 horsepower auxiliary output was going great in spite of it being 30 years old. Besides a few campers in the bush at numerous beaches, we had only seen one other craft on the water, the old man in the canoe. Langi Una was a beautiful homestead on the New South Wales side at about 1,940 kilometre mark and all decked out for tourists. Big signs towards the river said bed and breakfast. But tough river explorers like us don't sleep in 5-star B&B. No siree, Bob. Anyhow, feeling like legends, we proceed on. Oh, how pride comes before a fall. A kilometre downstream, the steering and the throttle arm falls off the outboard. You know, the one I was just giving a great rap to. Oh, over the next half hour, tried idea A and then idea B. Finally, idea C seemed to work. One paddle lashed to the outside cowling to steer. Add friction to the throttle control so it would stay put. And we're away again. Man against the wild. Nothing like it. This is world-saving stuff. Does it get any better? Bear Grylls? Never heard of the girl. Kubrawonga Beach number 2, as it is named on the map, will go down in history. They may even put a plaque there to remember the Gordon and Ross Murray Adventure Survival Point. Oh, boy. A couple of hours later, we're closing in on Cobram. Now, not sure if we're just getting to the end of the day and feeling tired, but something felt strange about that particular area. Not pleasant, suspicious, uncomfortable. Anyhow, so we motored on for another half an hour and settled on a nice sandy beach on the New South Wales side of the river, not realising until next morning that the traffic we saw driving along the Victorian side, there were actually people coming and going from a state forest camp site just downstream with toilets, etc. Anyhow, we got set up about half an hour before dark. A cold southeasterly wind made it too uncomfortable to stay outside any longer, so Gordon and I thought we could discuss and solve the world's problems better from in our warm sleeping bags in the 2-man tent. Now, maybe 2-man is exaggerating it a bit. By the time we were inside, It was a bit like two turtles sharing the same shell. We had to leave everything outside. Now, with the wind and dry weather, we figured we're not in danger of it raining and probably no dew. It's wonderful when you're right. Anyhow, in the morning, bright and early, all was dry. How getting up to water the trees was impossible without waking the other person, or should that be walking on the other person? Anyhow, I get up to pray just as first light was changing silhouettes to solids. In half an hour or so, I could see enough to distinguish snakes from sticks and got a fire going. Raisin toast and tea for starters, while beans and toast went for mains, followed by Gordon's famous percolated coffee. Now, it's a scary percolator. Continually overflows and squirts steam everywhere, not to mention the red-hot handle over the open fire. But it tasted so good.
Tuesday, the 13th of October.
Now, we packed up about 8, listening to the ABC News, followed by AM on Gordon's radio. It was decided to leave the air mattress blowing up. We'd forgotten to pack an electric pump, and we both just about passed out trying to blow them up the night before. This sure filled the front of the boat, not heavy but bulky. Anyhow, the main control arm, paddle lashed to the cowling, remember, needs relashing as it's come loose. Neither of us could understand why. So we applied our engineering expertise, like in the movie Apollo 13, to fix the problem. Anyhow, this time duct tape added to the fix, and we gave it a tick of approval. Oh well, we'll see. 8:30 was departure time, and with all on board, the two men against the Murray saga continued. I figured, and Gordon agreed, we'd be in Tookamwall around about 11 a.m, and maybe the weekly shave and shower would be in order. The little tent does bring us in close quarters. Anyhow, the river continues to be flowing swiftly and seems to be at a good level, about 100 metres wide. Glorious sunshine and just a gentle breeze from the southeast. Gordon's on the tiller, standing up like Charles Sturt, captain of the Murray expedition. We're rewriting history. We are going where no man has gone before. Well, that's today anyway. Come on, allow me a moment of fantasy. Oh, yes. Plastic bottles floating in the river are not just discarded rubbish. They should be avoided. We quickly discover that they are tied to logs, trees and snags of all descriptions. I saw my first signs of fish in the river this morning. Reckon it must have been a metre-long Murray cod. Well, at least that was the rumour I started. But beside bird life, it's pretty quiet. Well, the looked-forward-to campsite showers at Tookamwell turned out to be cold only, and I think the river was warmer. Now, being five-star travellers, we gave the cold showers a miss and travelled on. And we're about 30 kilometres ahead of schedule. Well, that's according to my schedule. Gordon is a she'll-be-right schedule. So I'm left checking maps, coordinates, distance travelled, watching the GPS for speed and logging times and locations every hour. I'm by default navigator and Gordon is chief steering officer. At least I get the comfortable armrest chair up front. Gordon has the well seat at the back of the boat where he sometimes has to stand when his rear end goes numb. Actually, he stands most of the time. We hit our first snag an hour or so ago. Boat skidded off. Gordon managed to spin the motor quickly enough so it would miss the log. Oh, he's a legend. This incident made us a bit jumpy though, and now even the ducks rippling the water ahead are checked twice. Okay, lunch was good at Carter's Beach around the 1866 kilometre mark. Boiled the billy, somehow got Lady Grey tea, which was considered a bit wussy. Anyhow, once combined with a tin of peaches smothered with lots of powdered milk, it all went down well. We followed these delicious morsels with a huge slice of Michelle's banana cake. A better description would be a chunk, because we left the knife in the boat, and being too lazy to take the 10 paces to get it, Gordon broke off a chunk, probably better than a knife anyhow, which was actually Gordon's fishing knife and still covered in last year's caked-on fish guts. Oh, mate. By 2:30, we're back on the water again. It's very hot, and a slight northerly is blowing, occasionally bringing a bit of relief. We found the beach umbrella and erected it for shade. What a sight we must have been, an auxiliary outboard tied together with ropes and tapes, as well as this huge umbrella. We slowly putted past a couple of guys in 2 canoes, and they certainly thought that the strategic conglomeration of bits and pieces was amusing. Anyhow, around 5:30 we arrived at our Tuesday night campsite called Mudbank Log Landing. It was located close to a big tree marked with 1,835 kilometres. Beautiful isolated spot. We're the only ones within Kui. We're both hoping for a nice quiet night. Most of all, I'm looking forward to a dip in the river for a good wash. It's time to change clothes after spending Sunday, Monday and Tuesday in exactly the same gear. I'm sitting back writing this, by the way, while Gordon makes the evening meal. Cup of tea first with toasted raisin bread. He'd made a new toaster as we had lost the one that I'd made from fencing wire at last night's campsite. Gordon found an old fish trap, ripped the netting off so that it was just left the wire. It was pretty heavy duty, about 6 millimetres thick. Next, we rebent the wire to optimum shape. Oh, he's the man. Anyhow, as I watch the master at work, I note that it is much warmer tonight. Last night, we were both wrapped in coats to protect against the cold southerly, but tonight it is just perfect. No mozzies, well, as yet. Our fire is busy consuming some big logs, and the mandatory tasks are completed. Beds are made, and everything is where it should be. The washing up of camp dishes is completed with Murray sand and mud as the cleaning agent. Hey, this is great stuff. Maybe we could market it. By the way, tea was a hot stew with toast, followed by another piece of toast lashed with honey. Both agreed that we were not going to starve any time soon. So we thought maybe a dessert of peaches and powdered milk could last till later. Now our final evening chore. It's time to strip off and jump into the river for a bath. Anyhow, the night was beautiful with the sky full of 1,000,000 stars, and about midnight I stirred from sleep as the mysterious vehicle slowly drove along the track beside our hoochie and disappeared into the darkness somewhere downstream, never to be seen again. It was around 5 in the morning. I woke to someone splashing the water like they were walking around our boat. "Hey, Gordon, stand to. There's someone mucking around with the boat," I whispered. Silently but quickly, he slithered out of the tent with torches in hand. The splashing continued, and we soon realised it was on the other side of the river, about 80 metres away. Now, in the quiet of the river at night, sound seemed to travel forever. Anyhow, starlight was not enough light to see any forms, or torches were for local illumination only, and which left us pondering about what would be splashing in the water. Our call of "Hello, who goes?" was ignored. Maybe it was a cow or a horse or a pig or even a goat was suggested as the sounds continued for about another 5 or 10 minutes. Anyhow, by now we're fully awake, so we stoked the fire for a brew, cooked some raisin toast and sat in our camp chairs to contemplate what was happening on the other bank. Now, Gordon, being very spiritual, said it's most likely angels travelling with us and they're having their early morning wash. We both agreed this was the most likely scenario as we sipped on the hot tea.
Wednesday, the 14th of October.
Anyhow, we're well ahead of schedule, about 60 kilometres ahead. So breakfast, prayer, Bible study and the mandatory ABC news and current affairs all contributed to a continued slow pace. Wednesday, the 14th of October has begun. ABC weather says we can expect a hot, dry day at 30 plus. Anyhow, we're impacted by the tranquil atmosphere out on the water. Mile after mile of Aussie bushland slip by as we pass from Barama State Forest and the wilderness places with names like the Bunyip Hole, Toogalong Creek, Rose Camp, Sandspit Creek, Burnt Landing and King's Landing. We can only assume that these were landing spots for the long-gone paddle steamers, just guessing. Now, river's about 120 metres wide and there's plenty of open water and very few snags to worry about. Banks on each side are only about 400 millimetres above the water level. The flat country runs out and is covered with red river gums everywhere. Oh, look out, there we go, out of fuel. Usually the 10-litre tank takes us a neat 50 kilometres. Our practice is to fill it up and keep going until it runs out, then refuel on the drift. Got this skill down pat now. We estimate we have enough stored fuel for another 200 kilometres and only need 110 or so to Echuca. Now, lots of willows in this stretch of the river. We think maybe someone's planted them. Gordon reckons they're a pest and not good for the river system. I believe him, so no argument, all happy. Cockatoos, ducks, shags are all going about their business. Coming up into the Milawa National Forest at the 1822 marker, a little camping area called the Gulf on the Victorian side looked like a well-set-up picnic area, although no one was enjoying it. There's hundreds of campsites and makeshift tracks along the Victorian side, but in contrast, the New South Wales side says, "Private property, keep out," and other not happy Jan type signs. On the New South Wales side, you see the properties are owned to the waterline by what seems to be very protective landowners. However, on the Victorian side, there's a 60 metre, or on the old maps 3 chain, Crown Land Reserve. So we peace-loving river cruisers generally camp on the Victorian side every night. Whoops, the straps holding the paddle onto the outboard motor have slipped. Oh God, what a Heath Robinson affair. William Heath Robinson was an English cartoonist and illustrator, best known for his drawings of ridiculously complicated machines for achieving simple objectives. The term Heath Robinson entered the language during the First World War as a description of any unnecessarily complex and implausible contrivance. Well, that pretty well sums up our repairs to our little outboard. 2 ropes, nylon strap woven around, more like a net over the cowling. Anyhow, we have to be careful not to block the cooling water outlet with the broad strap. Oh no, it only lasts about 20 minutes. More delays. Hang on a minute. What does it matter? Here I am getting caught up in schedules, timing, distance, logistics. Okay. I've self-analysed. I'm over it. Delivered. Now back to enjoying the journey. I make little reminders to myself. Regardless of what the clock says, we're here to have fun. Anyhow, lunch up near Punt Paddock Lagoon. Of course, everyone knows where that is. Yeah, right. Just before the 1806 marker, beautiful grassy area of a couple of acres and about 400 mil above water. There's deep water right up to the bank. Gordon noses up to the edge under power. I jump off the front of the boat onto the grass with a tie-up rope. Sounds easy, except when the bank is undermined and suddenly breaks away as my weight hits the shore. Down I go like a stone, right into the cold water for an unexpected dunking, bubbling and drowning while Gordon's cracking up, laughing and seriously looking for the camera. And he encourages me to do it again so he can get a video. Oh, thanks, mate. Anyhow, next couple of minutes I try to get out. No joy. The mud bank was so steep and the underwater clay so hard and slippery that I couldn't get a toehold anywhere. Good old Gordon had by this time jumped onto a secure part of the bank and managed to drag the boat with me clinging to it, to a snaggy root about 10 metres upstream so that I could crawl out. Anyhow, that episode sorted out my attitude. So with all my pride lost, I stripped off, hung up my clothes on the tree to dry. Running around almost stark as was okay, until 2 canoes came around the bend. I did a quick dash to dress in wet clothes so that the canoers would not be too startled. Well, we're underway again in State Forest area with no mobile phone coverage, maybe none until tomorrow. Oh, whoops, hit another snag, bang. Think I might have to sack that steering man. Well, maybe later. I'm still writing my journal. Well, here we are in the middle of Obama State Forest. Snakebite Camp, Double Holes and King's Landing slide by. There's no mobile phone coverage, no signs of life, well, human that is, no road sounds or lights of any at night. We are somewhere near Bunnydigger Creek for the night. Anyhow, we passed Picnic Point around 4 this afternoon, which is obviously the New South Wales holiday spot on the Murray with hundreds of caravan park type units for about 2 kilometres. Some permanent homes and units only about a metre above water level. We thought maybe it never floods. Anyhow, 2 or 3 school camps containing some 50 or 60 kids who seemed to be enjoying activities were doing so along the banks of the river. The surrounding country is heavily wooded. It's a low-lying floodplain. It appears to be like a swampy country, but dry. We saw our first historic mile marker on a tree today. These were used by the paddle steamers back in the 1890s. The number 258 was carved about 3 feet high on what once had been a very large tree. Now the tree was dead with only about a 12-foot high stump that had been preserved. We tried to find other signs downstream, but no luck. But now we know what to look for. We can keep our eyes glued for more. Oh, this is gripping stuff when you're travelling at the hypnotic speed of 10 kilometres an hour. I think someone in a canoe could keep up with us. Anyhow, we have the art of setting up camp down pat. We all know our jobs. Gordon has a cup of tea while I set up. He says he directs better with a cup of tea and sitting in the director's chair. He's a legend, isn't he? No, truly, it's become a smooth routine. There is a quick unload, which is achieved by tossing all the necessary gear onto the bank. Then I spread out the heavy-duty canvas ground sheet. That's about 3 by 3 metres. Stretch a rope between 2 trees and toss the plastic tarp over the top as a roof. A few tent pegs to hold the roof tarp in place and a couple of light spreader sticks to give roof cavity a little bit more space. And hey, presto, a great hoochie for the night. 2 blow-up mattresses, sleeping bags and pillows, and within minutes the fire is going and the brew has begun. Now, last night was quite hot and sticky in the dense forest area with little breeze. Now, thanks to daylight saving, the sun is still up at 7 p.m. Mozzies and flies were a bit of an issue around dusk, but a spray of bushman's repellent slowed them down and we enjoyed a tin of something that could have been beef stew and a slice of toast. Anyhow, tinned fruit and powdered milk is now a dessert staple, followed by a campfire brewed coffee and condensed milk. Oh, can it get any better than that? I don't think so. Anyhow, it's just on first light, Thursday the 15th, sitting in my camp chair while I coach the warm coals from last night's fire into life. The soft grey of dawn fades out the stars. Thinking about last night, I recall it was only about 9 o'clock. I knew I was tired as we sat around the campfire talking, well, Gordon talking with me listening. Then I noticed that Gordon had shifted to a new subject. I must have dozed off and missed a few minutes. Gordon seemed unawares that the Sandman kept snatching me away for a few moments here and there. But nevertheless, the problems of the world were being raised, dissected, analysed, solutions suggested, without missing a beat. Anyhow, the morning brew was going down well when the splish-splash of paddlers and the voice of teenagers broke through the quiet river murmurs as they glided around the bend. Gordon, quick as a flash, grabs his air horn and gives them several loud blasts. Wow, that certainly woke us up and scares the daylights out of everyone, including me. Anyhow, the canoes glide past with the girls complaining to us like we were some sort of higher authority, that they had been up since 4 this morning to get to their destination, Barma, by the appointed time. Oh, how time is our master. Not for Gordon and I, no sirree, Bob. We are at one with the rhythm of nature. We ride the time and not let it master us. Come on, Ross, it's 7:30, time to get cracking, comes the man packing up camp. He just shattered the one with nature moment I was having. Okay, so begins the day called Thursday. 9 a.m, we break camp and are sliding along at the mandatory 10 kilometres an hour. The river's only about 60 metres wide at this point. Maybe that's why it's called the Narrows on our charts. Anyhow, the day is warm, the morning sun is illuminating the trees. The shadows dance on the water as we navigate between the snags and glide past the willows. Not the weeping willows that I am familiar with, but Gordon, the man of great knowledge, says they are nevertheless willows. The Red River gums are also prolific. The surrounding flat countryside is only about a metre above water level. I washed my shirt and jocks last night and they're drying this morning. The shirt was very cold when I put it on wet and the jocks are hanging in the front of the boat to dry for a while. And yes, I'm wearing a spare pair. Oh, you're running ahead of me. Wait till you get the detail to get the right picture. Speaking of pictures, Gordon standing on a large stump to keep his feet clean while having a splash bath last night, totally starkers, would be forever etched in my memory. Oh my God, such is life. Anyhow, the boat seems to have a lot more room today. We've either eaten our way through our load or learned how to pack it better. The good old 8 horsepower auxiliary is still ripping along, all tied up with ropes and straps. We have to keep checking the cooling water flow because the ropes and straps can slip and cover the outlet. Well, all good. Engineer and steering officer Gordon keeps a check, keeps him amused and stops him going to sleep at the helm. We've become so familiar with the sound of the motor. We have become our own depth sounders and can tell the water depth by the sound and vibrations of the boat. Well, that's our story anyhow. We're legends in our own tinny. I mean fiberglass. Maybe I could shorten it to glassy. I think Murray fever's getting to me. Too much time to ponder and write. Anyhow, after a while, we become used to our hand signals and body language. The spoken words are reduced to, yep, okay, uh-huh. One of us would point and the other would nod and go, uh-huh. Or yep, kangaroo, or, emu, snag, cow, creek, house. Whether the other was right or wrong, or it was seen or not seen, you'd just smile and nod, okay. We all kept happy that way. All agreement, no dissension. Another beautiful kilometre slips by. Now, south of Brahma, the country changed significantly with high banks around 2 or 3 metres and large farms obviously cropping of some sort. Now, this was a really hot day and the beach umbrella was worth its weight in gold. The brackets that Gordon had fitted to hold it up were a bit ordinary and difficult to use, so the easiest way was simply just to hang on to it. Lunch was early as the temperature was rising and the banks were becoming more difficult and steeper to pull into. We found a little beach area near the 1746 marker just past some irrigation pumps. Now, it was registered on our maps as North Pump. As we enjoyed sliced peaches and covered in powdered milk, Gordon was able to systematically introduce me to all the trees, grasses and thistles around us. You know, the Red River gums and the cashews and, we'd know them by the common name of she-oaks. And of course, silver wattles and even Scotch thistles. Apparently, the Scotch thistles indicate good soil. The man's a wealth of information. I can scarcely take it in. As we sit and enjoy lunch, the river glides by and the northern breeze is just enough to cool the body. Shade's a bit sparse, so we just shift chairs every 5 minutes or so following its movement. We're perched up high, about 2 metres above the water, and watch the river traffic go by. Suddenly, a large high-powered catamaran with what looks like tourists on board skims by at about 60 kilometres an hour. Then along comes the old mate in a canoe, who was actually covering about the same distance as us each day. Well, lunchtime conversations between Gordon and I is riveting, and we both lazily linger over the decision to stay here and snooze for 1 or 2 more hours during the heat of the day, or pack up and continue on down the mighty Murray. The decisions we have to make, unbelievable. Anyhow, with no definitive resolution, we move again to a shady spot and doze for a while. Current thinking is that maybe around 2 or 3 we'll engage in the decision-making again. Anyhow, 3 o'clock was the go, so we head off into the northerly that's still blowing hot and strong. They say a big hot air mass from Central Australia is being pushed through our area by the various pressure systems dominating our continent. Anyhow, about an hour down the river, suddenly, without warning, the motor stops, out of fuel. By our calculations, we were 15 kilometres short of our next fuel fill. Strange. Gordon reckons he might not have topped it up to the top. Or we're punching against the headwind. He's got all the answers. Anyhow, I just agree and we swap fuel lines to the reserve 20 litres. All our calculations tell us that it will take us to Echuca, and being men of faith, we thought we should pray. God could cause a miracle and we could go twice as far and half the quantity. Sounded good, but we never quite got it to send it upstairs. Anyhow, the afternoon was coming to an end when we passed the junction of the Goulburn River and the Murray. The Goulburn River rises at the western end of Victorian Alps near Mount Matlock and descends the 654 kilometres to flow into this spot on the Murray, making it the longest river in Victoria other than the shared Murray. Anyhow, just before 6 we found this great swimming and camping area about 14 kilometres from Echuca. There was no one around, and so we set up camp. A powerboat dragging skis zoomed backwards and forth every 10 minutes or so. They seemed to be having fun. We enjoyed a glass of tonic water while the stew was heated and twilight was drawing the curtain down on another day. The daylight hours come to a close, but it's safe to say a lot can happen before the midnight hour. Under the soft glow of our camp light, I was reading Gordon's Bible. Now let me tell you about this amazing Bible. He reckons it's his anointed Bible. He tells me it was in his pack rolling around in a 4-wheel drive a while back, going from somewhere to somewhere else. and next to the diesel drum that leaked diesel all over his pack and soaked into the fabric zippered case of his Bible. He opened it at home and the house was filled with the fragrance, yes, diesel fragrance. Michelle asked him about the fine perfume, and being Gordon, quick as a flash, he said, "It's the anointing oil." Michelle suggested it was so special it should be relegated to the men's holy place, the shed. So there it had lived until now. Anyhow, Big Gordy, with his generous heart, decided to bring it on the trip. And I could read it if I liked. Oh, the fragrance when the zipper's open. There's nothing like low sulphur, reduced wax, high quality diesel fragrance. Just brings tears to my eyes, even thinking about it. Anyhow, I'm sitting near the fire enjoying my reading, and Big Gordon, as he's become affectionately known, was cooking up a brew when I noticed the wild ducks. You know, the ones had 100 or 200 metres in front of us while on the river every day. You'd look ahead for telltale signs of snags and see two up ahead. You'd move to the right and they'd seem to follow. Move to the left, the same thing. At that point, you realised that you were looking at these stupid ducks again. In the end, we call them mobile snags. So here are the mobile snags picking bits of food from around my feet. Now, this should have been a sign of things to come. When no one else is camped in this beautiful picnic area and the wildlife are so in charge that they fear not. Anyhow, the night around the campfire goes as usual, with Big Gordy waxing lyrical about one amazing thing after another, and me trying to keep an intelligent conversation between micronaps. I think that Gordy knew I was sleeping while he was talking, but was too polite to say anything. Anyhow, around 10 we called it a night and hit the sack. Actually slipped into the sack would be a better word, as the only bit of reasonable ground was on a downhill slope, and I knew I would be forever slowly sliding downhill all night. Anyhow, no sooner than lights are out, then there's a rummaging in our food box outside. Quick as a flash, I say, "Gordy, something's into our food." He's out the tent with his trusty LED torch, illuminating the face of this huge possum. Now, this big fella just stood his ground. It looked at Gordon, looked him in the eye and hissed as much to say, "Mate, you're on my territory now, step aside." With that, he turned and climbed a metre or two up a tree next to our tent and was joined by his equally large two girlfriends, all trying to stare down Big Gordy. Anyhow, Gordy collects all our food into one box, finds a lid, and we slid it into the tent between us. Now, just to be sure, I tossed my coat over the box. Now, my coat has now endured quite a lot of camp life. The usual sunburn cream soaked into the collar and cuffs, along with mosquito repellent, a bit of coffee and some gravy stains, but combine all that with a pungent smoke-enhanced smell and a good dose of body odour. I tell you, no one or thing or possum's going to be game to touch it. Anyhow, the piece lasted about 3 minutes when the possums are back down and into our rubbish bag. I give Gordy a bit of a sermon about us having dominion over all the animals and how they should respect us more than this. He decides he's going to act on my sermon, so he gets on all fours like a giant possum, crawls out of the tent, he heads straight towards the trio and screams like a big male possum protecting his territory, scaring the living daylights out of me, and the possums went ripping off, never to be seen or heard of again. I tell you, I've heard of horse whisperers and lion tamers, but possum pushers? Oh, is there any limit to this man's ability? Who can plumb the depths of his talent? Gordon tells me excellence has no limits. I lay in my sack and realised that such was the authority of the man that even the birds were now quiet and the frogs their mating calls silent. Anyhow, half an hour later, even the wind changed from hot northerly to a cool southerly, and the night wrapped its gentle arms around me. Thursday had been a big day. Friday the 16th, final push to Echuca, the summit of our adventure. Breakfast of raisin toast and tea to start with, followed by a huge serving of Michelle's special muesli. Gordon says it's a secret recipe, as I try to reverse engineer it, discovering all the ingredients. Gave up and just enjoyed. I think it might have originated from hippie days around Byron Bay area. Anyhow, time to enjoy camp, fire, brewed coffee and more raisin toast, then pack up and extract the boat from the mud it's stuck in by the skiers continually creating a wake that had rocked the boat into a mud groove. Anyhow, we're away by 9. And before we knew it, Echuca pops up around the bend. Historic paddle wheelers everywhere. And the old wharves. Wow. We have powered up the 50 horsepower for the final push and to steer better, leaving the old 8 horsepower auxiliary to rest after its 275 kilometre journey. A public jetty with rubbish bins gave us a chance to unload our accumulated waste along with bits and pieces from other people's garbage we'd collected. Anyhow, we found the boat ramp at Victoria Park Reserve about a kilometre downstream from Echuca Port and tied up nearby on a nice grassy bank with trees to rope to. Walked up to the caravan park, paid $5 to use their showers. Oh, the pleasant joy of hot water and a shave. Picking up my old clothes that had endured for 5 days was interesting, with the intense smell of smoky clothes filling my senses. Anyhow, stuffed them into a plastic bag, never to be opened until a washing machine is nearby. Anyhow, Gordon has secured his V-Line ticket to get back to Yarrawonga, where he'd pick up the bus and trailer. Now, while walking back along the street, Gordon noticed a few pubs offering great counter meals for lunch. Sounds like the go, but first he needs a shower. There's some sort of steamboat regatta is on this weekend, and dozens of little steamboats from a day long ago have been restored and are now gliding up and down the river, mixing it with the tourist traffic on the larger paddle wheelers like the Emmylou or the Canberra or Pride of the Murray and other such names of the past. These paddle wheelers are huge compared to the others. Now, the Emmylou starred in the TV series All the Rivers Run, in which she was renamed P.S. Providence. She's powered by a beautifully restored 1906 Marshall & Son steam engine. I might add there are some $1 million boathouses, or should I say mansion boats, about 60 foot long with double stories of affairs with 60 horsepower outboards. They're all moored there as well. But not much is being said, maybe because Big Gordy is off having his compulsory shower, or maybe because we have arrived. Like our air mattresses have the plug pulled and deflating, we too have relaxed. You know, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. We can just stare at the continuous flowing river and smile that we at least know some of its secrets. Over the past 5 days, we have bonded with the mighty Murray, at one with this wandering waterway. We have felt its power, tasted its water, studied its curves and intricacies, seen its rawness yet its gentleness. More than a line on a map or a dividing line of states, or a water supply for farms and communities, but a living thing of intoxicating beauty. Now, Gordon and I had succumbed to a lure of roast lunch at the pub, followed by a double ice cream and a waffle cone, to enjoy while we walked the tourist-stacked streets of this island port town of Echuca. By the way, the name means meeting of the waters, and is indicative of the role rivers have played in the town's existence. Echuca is situated close to the junction of the Goulburn, the Campsie and the Murray rivers. The Campsie is a major Victorian river and joins the Murray just a couple of kilometres downstream. It was first settled in 1850s, and Echuca has risen in prominence, and in the 1870s was Australia's largest inland port. Now, being the point of closest distance between the Murray River and the major city of Melbourne, Echuca was both a key river port and railway junction. Steam-driven paddle boats would arrive at the 400-metre-long Red Gum Wharf, unloading wool, wheat and other grains and so forth, livestock and timber that were all to be transported by rail to Melbourne. Okay, it's 4 in the afternoon at Echuca, and Gordon is on the V-Line coach heading back the 150-kilometre road trip. Remember, it's 275 by river. Anyhow, he gets back to Yarrawonga to pick up our big blue bus and trailer. I'm here on my Pat Malone, watching over the boat, listening to ABC radio, waiting for Gordy to come back at about 9 tonight. Maybe just close my eyes and catch a little Bo Peep. No such luck. "Hey mate, what you up to?" comes the booming voice of Theo Brockman, a friend of mine from up at Deniliquin. Don and I first met Theo and his wife Linda about 2 years ago while fixing the Vision radio transmitter on the water reservoir up there. He had 7 kids then. A little while later, number 8 was born. He said everyone was congratulating them, but kept on asking if he knew how it happened. Or did he have a TV? Or when is enough enough? He reckons originally thought 2 might do, but God said, no, mate, you can handle 8. Time will tell if that's the word. Anyhow, we got out a couple of fishing rods and a can of worms, chucked it in, kicked back in our camping chairs, hoping nothing would get on our lines and disturb our peace. Anyhow, the next 4 hours made for great conversation. He even slipped into town and picked up some Thai takeaway. The old sprinkle of rain failed to cause any dent in the lay-back rhythm of our time together. What a delight. Anyhow, about 8 o'clock, he travelled back the 80 clicks to Niliquin to pick up the kids and take them home from their youth group. Now, the darkness was full on by now. No moon, no street lights, low cloud covering any starlight. It was pitch black. There was some rubbish left over from tea, and I decided to wander around the boat ramp into a picnic area to the nearest rubbish bin. I thought I was getting good at navigating in the dark, but no, wrong again. Suddenly dropped over a 2-foot retaining wall, found myself skidding on hands and knees on the gravel road surface of the boat ramp. Now I really have stressed and ripped jeans. When I brushed the gravel and leaves off with 2 swipes, I reckon now that's what it means by double-tap denim. I saw all that in a fancy jean store where you paid extra for your jeans that were labelled stressed and ripped double-tapped denim. My pride was a bit dented, but no one was around to witness the event, so you know the old philosophical saying, if no one saw a man fall at the boat ramp, did he really fall? Anyhow, down the river, a couple of large double-decker hired houseboats were tied up to the trees for the night. They were obviously having a good time. I don't think it was a church meeting, though, with all the splishing and splashing and drinking and the singing, all on a Friday night. Sort of reminds me of a 60s song. Anyway, way upriver through the trees, I heard the long, loud toot-hoot of a large riverboat, maybe the Emmylou, with high floodlights lighting up the banks on each side and the rhythmic chuffa-chuffa of its engines and the splash, splash, splash of its paddles scooping the water. And here it comes and there it goes, the beautiful sight of a riverboat slowly passing with its dinner guests on a nighttime cruise enjoying the occasion. It could have been a scene directly out of the 1890s. Anyhow, a few minutes later, they were around the bend and disappeared into the dark. I never did see them come back, maybe tied up downstream for the night or returned while I was asleep, who knows. Anyhow, in the distant dark, I could hear the rumbling of a diesel bus and rattling of an empty boat trailer. Yep, Gordon and the bus were lost in Victoria Park Reserve. Yeah, that's an uncommon event. So Gordon sees the lights of the party boats anchored down the river and heads towards them thinking that's where I'll be. I don't think they appreciate Gordon's high beam lights shining across their party, ruining their atmosphere. He quickly retreated out of the area and seeing my flashing torchlight 500 metres away, headed in my direction. Anyhow, we both reckoned it was too risky a manoeuvre to try to bring the boat out in the pitch black of the boat ramp. You would think that they'd have installed a few street lights on the Echuca boat ramp just for us, but no siree, Bob, not on your Nelly. So the wise option was to park the bus under the no camping sign and catch some sleep until first light. We were so tired, I think I heard our final prayer as, "Good night, Lord." The rest is in moaning or perhaps snoring. Anyhow, Friday faded to black with the pitter-patter of raindrops on the roof. Saturday's first light saw the boat on the trailer, and at 7 a.m, right on schedule, the big blue bus and boat pulled out of Echuca. I got out the maps, GPS, TomTom, compass and watch, just so Big Gordy would know where he was. He doesn't want to get lost again. Coachman extraordinaire, double clutching each gear change as we manoeuvre through the streets of Echuca and smoothly wind up to our cruising speed, heading east on the homeward journey along the Murray Valley Highway, sometimes called Highway B400. Anyhow, the only decision to make breakfast and lunch stops, along with a fuel point somewhere. Anyhow, Yarrawonga comes and goes. We turn left onto Albury-Wodonga and cruise along the M31 or the Hume Highway. A couple of hundred clicks later, we leave the Hume and run east, heading towards the snowy mountain highway for Mount Tumut and a good old Subway for lunch. Now, Gordy and I have different tastes when it comes to Subway, so we decide not to get a shared foot-long, but sort ourselves out. So I get my favourite seafood with heaps of jalapeno peppers and salt and pepper along with Thousand Island dressing. Oh, good tucker. Anyhow, I picked the long mountain climb coming into the high ranges of Kosciuszko National Park to doze off as the bus grinds along in third gear, sometimes second. Occasionally waking with the rattling bouncing of the bus as Gordon pulls over to let the line of traffic caught behind us go by. Anyhow, the air suspension seat makes a ride quite bearable. Passing through Cooma, we see the black line of storm clouds ahead and lightning on the horizon to the east, and we know that the millions of bugs and oceans of moth guts on the windscreen will soon be a slurry across the glass before being washed off, possibly somewhere near the top of Brown Mountain. Anyhow, it turned out it was the bottom of the mountain when the skies opened, which was good for the red-hot brakes, I guess. They got a good workout with the load we were trying to hold back. And at the three-quarter point, I could smell the aroma of brake pads cooking. As rainwater streamed under the hood, I knew that was doing our motor good. I could hear another old song from the 60s called Maybelline. Anyhow, at 6 o'clock, we pulled up in the same spot we'd left last Sunday arvo, right in front of Gordon's house in Bega. Adventure completed. You know, Mark Twain would say, I have found out that there ain't no surer way to find out whether you like people or hate them than to travel with them. Hey, 5 months later, we liked each other enough to repeat the adventure, this time starting at the Hume Weir near Albury, Wodonga, and finishing at Yarrawonga with just as much fun. You know, water is released from the dam from October to April, and that's the best time to travel the river if you ever want to give this a go. Now, as I write this, I'm in Townsville at 75 years of age. Gordon now lives in Adelaide and is 77. You know, he's still talking about buying a yacht for us to sail around Australia. I think his adventure imagination is writing cheques our bodies can't cash.
This is the end of Murray Mischief. The third adventure was in 2018, travelling from Townsville to the tip of northern Australia. Ross Taylor and Harry Scott spent 10 days exploring the wilds of Cape York. The adventure is called The Great Escape. Wednesday, the 15th of August.
Sun's dipping below the western horizon as we pull into our first night stop, Rifle Creek Rest Area. Technically not a camping area, but the local authorities allow camping for a maximum of 48 hours. Actually, they encourage it with keeping clean toilets and empty rubbish bins and a waste disposal for RVs. Oh, and it's free. Yes, you guessed it. Word has got around and about 40 or 50 vans, trailers, RVs and tenters like us have clustered here for the night. Tight as. Anyhow, the Cape York escape for two old silly buggers has begun. Harry and Ross, or H&R, yes, I'm the Ross. Now, we talked about it months ago over breakfast one morning. After the wet was the time decided. Somewhere in the months after June or July, mid-August seemed good. Anyhow, the diaries marked, carved in stone, appointments pushed aside, equipment sorted, workouts at the gym to get fit. Well, we watched a video on workout routines and thought watching Friday night football would prepare us. Come hell or high water, we were determined, just as the Nike ad says, just do it. Anyhow, Harry commandeered one of the work utes, complete with shade view signage, serviced it, whacked on new tyres, then loaded it with all manner of stuff. I'd called Harry in the weeks leading up to the trip to inquire if he had thought of this or that, and each time the reply come, yes, Ross, got it covered. Anyhow, 2 hours in, we are hungry enough to check out the Ellerish pub for a country lunch treat. Then we drove up the Palmerston Highway to Atherton Tableland, stopped briefly at Malanda pub to see the historic photo collection and for the Big H to light up a mozzie coil. Well, he told his wife he's given up smoking, so this can't be a cigarette. Anyhow, onward and upward, northward through the Atherton Tablelands, Mareeba and finally Mount Malloy. It was famous years ago for the copper mining and the Chinese people with their market gardens. Today it's a tiny 200 plus people. Just down the road is Rifle Creek, our first night stop. So, Harry, let's set up camp and find what we're missing. Nothing, Ross, comes a grunt reply. The skeptic in me silently says, we'll see. Okay, after an hour I'm convinced. The amazing folding tent, the LED strip lights, the double burner gas stove, the never-ending battery power supply, tables, chairs, refrigerator, icebox, cups, plates, knives and forks. I glance in the back of the ute and there's a huge steel tow rope. Hope we don't need that, I think to myself. Anyhow, he keeps getting this and that out. Next, he'll pull a rabbit out of the hat. Yep, there it is. Dimmer control for the LED strip lights. He's thought of everything. Anyhow, so we sit and talk with the dimmed down lights and the soft glow of the single sodium street lamp over the toilet block. Up through the trees we observe Mars. Over in the west is Venus and a crescent moon. I tried explaining the rarity of having Mars and Venus together, but Harry, the subject evaporates. Anyhow, sometime later there is the sound of tent flap zipper closing and I fade to black. Well, being surrounded by thick bush of Rifle Creek, you would think the birds and wildlife would be your wake-up call to Thursday the 16th of August. But they could not compete with the 5 a.m. rush hour of cattle trucks and tradies heading for Mareeba or Cairns or Mossman along the adjacent highway. Thank God, only one of the huge road trains uses his exhaust brakes to slow for the creek crossing. You know the sound from when you were a kid and you put a piece of plastic on your bike to flick against the spokes just to make it sound like you had a motor? The road train is 100 decibels louder. Someone should bless him. I don't think the campers at Rifle Creek did. Whoops, there goes big plump turkey that thinks I've got something to eat. Sorry, mate, you're not getting my cup of tea. Suddenly his or her mate appears and they race off into the scrub together. Well, such is life. By 9 a.m. we're picking up a few supplies from the Mount Malloy supermarket. Well, actually a little grocery store, and I'm the only customer. Anyhow, the smell of fresh cooked baked bread is enticing. And I grab a loaf and some ice. Anyhow, the road to Lakeland is a great bitumen highway up over the mountains and into the stony and sparse vegetation of the area. How quickly it has changed from the lushness of the Atherton tablelands to this. Anyhow, without stopping, we turn west onto the Peninsula Development Road and cruise into Laura Hotel for a steak sandwich. Now, the Laura pub was more like an old shop with seats and tables outside under the old mango trees and good for the H to light up another mozzie coil. We're just chomping away on our steak sandwich when a dirty four-wheel drive pulls up with a cloud of dust and out steps a wiry, sunburnt, crumpled old bloke. He grabs a beer and joins us at the bench table. A rough trip, I asked. Do I look that bad, comes the reply. Yes, mate, you do. I've been up to Chili Beach and had a bit of car trouble, but she's good now. Anyhow, the conversation wanders off in some other direction, and we manage to chew the steak sandwich down and head off. By now we notice all the vehicles coming in the opposite direction are the same colour, red. They might have started as white, black, grey, but the Cape has levelled the options, red dirt. Anyhow, suddenly we drop off the bitumen into the wild corrugation of dirt road, and the words development road has meaning. Anyhow, the H switches to rally driver and I'm scanning ahead for the next dust hole. These are large potholes that are filled with fine powder. Whoops, yes, that was one. Well, boy, we bounce on and the fine red powder blows all over the windscreen. Pretty soon, I just go to sleep and leave Harry to find his own rough spots. Now, the old telegraph station at Musgrave seems like a great place to stop for the night. It's only 3 o'clock, but we look at each other and knew that enough was enough. So we pick out a campsite and begin to set up our tents. Harry has his, the one you just toss on the ground, grab a lever and it's up, or so he says. Mine, of course, requires skill and expertise and 10 minutes. Anyhow, there's an unspoken challenge between two males trying to outdo each other in the race to get their tent up first. I let Harry win, makes him feel good. So here we are watching the entertainment of red dusty vehicles after red dusty vehicle roll into the 5-acre campsite and begin setting up for the night. We sit back with a cold drink and discuss the pros and cons of each rig, noting their suspension, vehicle type, tyres and trailer, and talk like experts. It's good conversation between two old blokes. There seems to be only one vehicle that the Big H likes, Land Rovers. He reckons Toyota drivers may not be able to spell Toyota, but they have a feeling. And that's about all, he says. Nissan, Mitsubishi, Holden, Ford, Jeep don't seem to even warrant discussion. Anyhow, somewhere along the evening, Harry pulls a couple of his wife's pre-cooked frozen chicken sautés out of and the arduous job of preparing the nighttime meal begins. Hey, tell Di that was delicious, I say. I think Harry makes a mental note to pass it on. Anyhow, some peaches and powdered milk, and the curtains are pulled on another day. Well, until about midnight, when a monstrous triple road train loaded with who knows what grinds and thumps into the huge dusty parking bay a few metres from our campsite. Actually, the parking bay is the southern end of the airstrip. Anyhow, the engine rumbles and idles for about 10 minutes while the big brute cools down, then glorious silence. Dingoes howl across the dry river wake me up, and I stagger out to boil the billy. Harry snores on. Friday the 17th has begun. He just doesn't know it yet. By 10 a.m, we're the last to leave the old telegraph station. Now, he spent the morning checking out the huge freshwater crocs known as freshies. There are about 4 living in the dam on the western side of the campgrounds. Now, being freshies, they are more interested in eating turtles, eels and fish than checking on us humans. Well, now we're ripping on towards Cowan. The road has deteriorated to many kilometres of rough, dusty dirt and gravel. Good old Harry presses on and upward at an average of about 80 kilometres an hour. The few houses of Cowan come and go in a blink, but mobile coverage is few and far between up in the Cape. So we stop on the outskirts and let our wives know we're still alive and kicking. Not sure what planet my TomTom GPS navigator is on, but it's almost useless. Shows 160 kilometres to the next town, then calculates 17 hours to get there. Harry reckons it must be taken its times from 30 years ago when it was a goat track. At least now it's a horse track. Anyhow, the dust sections around the Archer River are long, hot, hard and dirty, with clouds of red dust swirling over our load. No worry, Harry has strapped my mattress on the top to protect all his gear. Thanks, mate. We dropped the tyre pressure down this morning. The good old Isuzu D-Max is handling it like a dream. Speaking of dreams, that's me dozing off in the passenger seat. I wake up as we cross the Archer River and make a mental note that this might be a good spot to stop on the way back down. Pushing on, we aim for lunch at a crossroads 160 kilometres southeast of Weipa. A cold drink and a ham sandwich under the shade of a huge signpost. Life's good. By now we're on the western side of the Great Dividing Range. All the rivers, when they flow, are draining into the western side of the Cape. The name Western Cape pops up in businesses all around Weipa. Western Cape Tyres, Western Cape Church, etc., etc. Anyhow, the Weipa Caravan Park is chock-a-block because there's a bull riding competition on this weekend. But we get a good spot and enjoy the shade of the afternoon. Harry beat me at putting up the tent again, so it's his job to cook tea tonight. Lamb shanks are on the menu, he tells me. Yes, thanks to Di. We share jobs. He drives, I snooze. He cooks, I eat. I wash up, he watches.
Saturday, the 18th of August.
Vietnam Vets Day. Long tan and all that. Anyhow, Harry's still out to it, and we'll stay that way till 8 or so. Meanwhile, I have a brew and go for a walk, a slow stroll actually, to find my way around this part of Weipa. Now, the caravan park is quite large, and you see all sorts of off-road rigs here, like a camping expo from some macho big boys' toys. Anyhow, heavy chassis, shock-absorbed, high-clearance, off-road, diesel-powered machines with names like Top Ender, Kimberleys, Black Series, Patriot, Overlander. No wussy names like Sun Camper or Sunliner or Monte Carlo. All have knobbly off-road tyres, half flat. See, the trick is to drop your tyre pressure so the corrugated roads are cushioned by the softer tyres. We usually drop to about 30 pounds per square inch. Anyhow, the hot showers were so good last night, I hit them again. Harry's awake by now, cooking bacon and eggs. Now, we don't have a toaster, but throwing a slice of bread into the bacon fat on the hot pan and frying it is a bad habit that Harry taught me. That's what mates are for. Now, he makes me swear not to tell his wife. She'll be right on to me for eating the wrong foods. No worries, mate. What happens on the Cape stays on the Cape. Anyhow, Weipa is on the western shore of Cape York, is the bauxite capital of the world. Comelco, now called Rio Tinto, built the mine and shiploading facilities back in the 60s with 3,500 people. It's the largest town on the Cape. Now, the colour red is the dominant theme. The bauxite colour pervades everything. After an hour or so, we seemed to have driven every road and seen all the sights of Weipa. So, after a strenuous morning of sightseeing, we settled back into the shade and enjoy lunch and a cold drink. Found Woolworths and stocked up on the essentials like ice cream. I got a hankering for ice cream, so I bought a box of chocolate-covered ones. Of course, we have no way of keeping them frozen, so we had to eat them all. Oh boy, I'm over ice cream. Anyhow, about midnight, the crowd from the bull riding event come home, all full of cheer. Can't say the other campers were that happy. Oh boy. Anyhow, 5:30 Sunday morning and the herd is stirring. There are probably about 100 campers moving north and south every day, and I've noticed a herd behavioural pattern develop as the same group of people moving about the same distance each day. Now, stockmen talk of moving a big herd of cattle, and after a few days they sort themselves into lead cows, left and right, then tail enders, and they form up like that every day. Now, I've watched the same alpha travellers move out each day, leading the herd to the next stop. Then comes the middle movers of 8 a.m, then Harry and I. Well, before 10 is good for us. We always seem to be the last to break camp. Then there is the arrival and set-up routine. The moment the site is secure, the race is on. Tarps, tents, bedding and portable equipment of every kind, with husband and wife teams moving without a word being spoken. All the time, one eye watching the camp beside you. The first to have the camp table and chairs with a glass of wine and cheese wins. Nothing is spoken, but everyone knows who today's trophy holder is. Human behaviour is so much fun. Anyhow, 10 a.m, clack, 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 goes the starter solenoid. Whoops, flat battery. Anyhow, the Engelfriedian lights drew more power than expected. Or maybe the Utes battery is suffering from age and the hammering of rough roads. Anyhow, Harry gets out his smart start and clips the tiny unit onto the dead battery. "She'll do it," says Harry to a disbelieving Ross. And crank, 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 and hey presto, the engine bursts into life. Ah, God, he's a legend. Anyhow, once again, we're on the road again, making music with my friend. Taking the dotted line shortcut on a map is often fraught with danger, but not so with the well-graded track across to Batavia Downs to rejoin the main north-south Bamaga Road. It's a veritable highway, been recently graded, and Harry scoots along at about 100 clicks, except for the occasional narrow bridge and creek crossing. Anyhow, northward, ever northward, the push is on. This is the language you develop with your fellow explorers, travellers and tourists. I'm making the final push to the summit today. Or my base camp is Bamaga. Or we're overnighting in Bramwell Tourist Park, and then we'll make the dash to the top. When they're coming back, it's not called the top or the north point or the summit. It's simply referred to as the tip. Yes, we made it to the tip last Wednesday, is said with pride and a sense of accomplishment. Well, Harry and I decide that Bramwell Station Tourist Park sounds like a good 3-hour run from Weipa. So I had jumped on the line before we left Mobile Range and booked us in for dinner and a show with a campsite. The thought of a large steak and veggies dinner with damper and dessert has our taste buds tingling, and being mere males, we are enticed by the food, and the race is on, pedal to the metal. We arrive at this cattle station called Bramwell Station just after 1 and find ourselves a good campsite. Now, Bramwell is one of the few working cattle stations on Cape York. Most have actually been bought up by the government for national parks, but not this one. It's about 600,000 acres, that's 50 kilometres by 50 kilometres, and all the usual station, houses, sheds, trucks, machinery, mustering yards, airstrips, satellite communication and diesel power plants. Oh boy, not sure what their cattle numbers are. I think they said about 6,000, so with such a small number they probably have a lot of unsuitable land for grazing. Anyhow, I got all this info at the 6 p.m. happy hour before the meal. Now, the tucker was great, and the one-man band entertainment, called the Bagmen, even better. And we laughed and sang until about 9, then all wandered back in the moonlight to find our tents. Now, Harry and I chatted for a while. Well, Harry chatted and I listened. Then the Sandman grabbed me, and that was Sunday. Our first light on the Cape comes early, about dawn each morning, as the Irishman Harry would say. He's dead to the world, by the way. The stores are locked in the car, so I'll have to wait for the man to crawl out of his cave. You know, you don't go slithering into another man's tent and then go rumbling in his pockets looking for the car keys, especially where he's wearing those pants. No sirree, Bob. Well, today is Monday the 20th, and we push toward our base camp at a beach place called Sacia, just a few clicks from Bamaga. Sacia is also the harbour from where the ferry goes to Thursday Island. Now, I booked us on a Thursday Island tour for Wednesday, so we might go to the tip tomorrow. Oh, well, we'll see. Anyhow, the cool, clear waters of Elliott Creek tumble over several rock ledges on its way to the coast. It's a bit of a mystery where all the water comes from. For these northern rivers, it's the dry season. Everything else is dry, but here we have fresh water flowing all year round. Now, some speculate that this underground water is coming all the way from the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Who knows? Anyhow, we head off down the side track about 6 kilometres, and quick as a flash, I'm into my togs. Too many people for me to go starkers. Anyhow, out in the water, they're letting the metre-high waterfall gently massage my back. It's about now I realise I've got my glasses on. Whoops. I keep telling Harry the water is beautiful, 28 degrees and very refreshing. Oh, he says he'll melt if he gets in, so he just takes some few pickies. Anyhow, a few more clicks over very rough gravel road, and we are at the Jardine River. Wow, what an amazing amount of fresh water flowing, but full of crocs. No swimming here. The crossing is by barge only and costs about $130 for a ute, and includes, of course, the return journey. Uh-oh, here we go. The ticket shop has a big sign, closed for lunch, 12 till 1. So we cool our heels and wait. No sense in getting anxious. We're now on Cape York time, and it has its own rhythm, slow. The Sacia camping ground is pretty dusty, but right on the northwestern coast, and only walking distance to the island ferry that we'll take to Thursday Island on Wednesday. Time for some washing, so Harry and Ross have finally come to the end of T-shirts and undies, so down to the shop for some pegs. Here's something that the big H had forgotten along with washing detergent. So as the sun slipped over the islands to the west, the mozzies came searching for whom they may devour. Anyhow, I gave them the old ridden coils, and that sorted them. Now, Irishman Harry decided it was potatoes night, so out came a can of pre-cooked potatoes. He was disgusted to read on the label that they were a product of Holland and Germany. Some conversation followed, more like a lecture to the single student me about the superiority of Irish potatoes and the 101 ways they could be cooked, including a bread-type pancake thing. Now, when I made reference to a hash brown, I was simply glared at with contempt. Anyhow, apparently they were especially delicious when reheated in hot bacon fat. Taste always trumps healthy eating in these male conversations. Now, the real problem was that he heated the potatoes in our kettle, and later in the dark, I wondered why what the extra ingredient was in my cup of tea. Then it dawned on me that it was the fragments of potatoes. Oh, the things I have to put up with. I think Harry is still waxing on about Ireland when I fell off the perch into the sack and left him to the mozzies. Good night.
Tuesday, the 21st of August.
The constant rhythmic sound of a large diesel generator is humming in the distance as the stars fade and the sky brightens with another day on the Cape. Okay, base camp has been established at Sacia, and today we stretch out to the top, or the tip as it's called here. No point in rushing, only half an hour drive and a bit of a walk and the mandatory photo at the tip sign. Anyhow, the half-hour trip ends up nearly 2 as Big Harry decides to explore the other beaches on the way. To get to Punsand Bay, we turn left at the Croc Tent, which is a tourist tent in the middle of nowhere selling T-shirts and a whole lot of other useless stuff. Anyway, we walk through and out the back without being enticed to buy anything, get to Punsand Bay Resort, and lo and behold, there's a helicopter sitting on the beach waiting for someone to hire. And we took some pictures like we owned the thing, then backtracked to the Croc Tent and continued our push to the tip. Now, I'm walking from the car park along the rough path over the rocks towards the tip sign when a couple about my age coming back from the tip stop and say, "We beat you," in a friendly but determined manner. "Oh, what are you on about?" I ask. "Well, you raced past us yesterday going like a bat out of hell just after the Jardine River crossing, so we thought it must have been a race. Anyhow, we beat you to the tip." "Okay," I replied. "Fair enough, you win." They were happy. Now, we're the only car with shade view signed across the door, so we're easily recognisable. We now have the nickname Shade View Rally Team, as we seem to be always catching up and screaming past in a storm of dust and stones. I often bump into people we pass at the next night's campground, and with a mysterious look each way, lean over and whisper that Harry is really the Stig testing work utes in rough country. Please keep the secret and don't tell anyone. You can bet your bottom dollar you'll hear them on Channel 40 the next day. "Hey, look out, here comes the Stig." No secrets on the Cape. I'll have to get him a white driving suit and a helmet. Anyhow, the southeast trade winds were blowing their typical 20 or 30 knots as we waited our turn to get our photo taken at the end of with the road sign saying, "You are standing at the northwest point." Ah, yes. The northwest point, the most northern. You are standing at the northernmost point of the Australian continent. Must be 50 or 60 people here. And I asked one with a lot of camera stuff around his neck to take a photo of Harry and me framing the sign. No worries. Got that done. Stand back to savour the moment. Mission accomplished. Anyhow, we clamber on back the way we came. For some reason, people have collected stones and piled into huge cans that stand to centuries, watching over the tip. Harry has great pearls of knowledge and talks about Inuit tribes of the Arctic region of North America doing the same thing. Yeah, whatever. But there in amongst them is a large termite mound clinging to the rocks, challenging the man-made structures. And I look at it and go, little ants did that. Back at the car, we pull out Harry's sister's fruitcake we've been saving for this momentous occasion. Carve a big piece off, grab a coldie and sit under the shade of a beech tree and savour the victory. Oh, man over the wild, pushing back the frontiers, going where we've never been before. Anyhow, a few words are spoken and each man contemplates the moment. We are legends. Hey, we checked out a place called Somerset over toward the east. This is a remarkable place, and when marked out as a town in 1860s, was expected to become the Singapore of Australia, but the excessive tidal run in the sea prevented it ever developing. It had a government residence, police magistrate house, customs house on the south side of Somerset Bay, Marines barracks, medical superintendent house on the northern side. Anyhow, the Jardine brothers brought cattle overland from Rockhampton to establish a cattle station in the area, and one of the graves is that of their father, John Jardine. Anyhow, he was Somerset's first police magistrate and commissioner of Crown Lands, who died in 1874. Now, today, the place is totally unkept and overgrown with scrub and just simply a collection of old mango trees. Anyhow, back at Base Camp Sacia for a grandpa nap and doze the afternoon away.
Wednesday, the 22nd of August.
Righto, Harry, time to open the eyes. Have some brekkie and we jump on the 8 a.m. Pedell's ferry to Thursday Island. Now, Harry needs a bit of a jump start to get going, but we make it with minutes to spare. Anyhow, the big cat navigates around the reefs and islands, and we're on the wharf at Thursday Island by about 9:15. Now, the tour bus is waiting there for us, and off we go to explore the 3.5 square kilometres of this strategic island, home to about 3,000 people and seat of government for the Shire of Torres. In 1877, the government set up the island to handle the pearling industry, and with much better harbour than Somerset. Of course, the fear of the Russians attacking in 1892 had the Australian government establish a military fort on Green Hill, and with 3 6-inch guns and tunnels set up, that today is a museum. The guns were only fired in earnest back in who knows when to force a ship to identify itself. It worked. Millman Hill on the eastern end of Thursday Island is the other high point with wind turbines and a microwave tower. Anyhow, Horn Island next door has the airstrip and water supply for Thursday Island. During World War II, the Japanese attacked Horn Island several times as it was a strategic Allied airbase. Anyway, we drive around to the cemetery and I noticed the graves are facing west. Very unusual. Most Christian graves face east. Muslim face towards Mecca. Maybe it's the hundreds of Japanese graves that usually face downhill. No one seems to know. Anyhow, Harry shouted me a big counter lunch at the most northern pub in Australia and we wandered back towards the wharf. I crashed out on the cool green grass of the nearby park. Anyhow, back in Sacia, good old Harry is off to the shop to get essentials for tonight, like ice for his dropper cordial. Whoops, the battery's dead again. Out comes the smart start and he's away. Then, as just a few minutes later, he's walking back. Apparently he stalled on the speed bump at the exit to the park. Oh, how awkward. I had suggested he leave it here to recharge, so he gives me that look and says, "Grumble, grumble, it's your fault." He'll get over it by the time he gets back. With a few packets of Mozzie coils and ice for his cordial and coke. He'd run out of both. Anyhow, scrub turkeys rule the park, scratching around and ripping rubbish bags to pieces. One decided to roll a can along the road outside my tent last night at about 4 a.m. It'll end up in a can if it tries that again tonight. I might attach a sign near my tent, alerting it to my intentions. Only fair thing to do, I reckon. Anyhow, the plan is to head to Captain Billy Landing tomorrow. We'll be out of range of everything for a few days, so I have to book with the national parks and reserve our sites. Also pick up a few supplies from Bamaga and charge all our batteries overnight. Harry's worried about the car battery. Hours and hours over rough roads can shake the innards out of a battery, so we'll try for a new one tomorrow. Anyhow, strange lines form in the sand around our camp. They've been a mystery. And I follow and try to find out what made these tracks. A lizard? A tail from some large animal? No, says Harry, a mongrel dog dragging his chain with a great weight attached. Apparently I slept through it all. Good thing Harry's on duty. He's the source of all knowledge, including fake news, rumours, gossip, and I suspect stories of a giant dog dragging a ball and chain. Yeah, right. Okay, Thursday the 23rd, and finding a new battery in Sacia or Bamaga is the first order of the day. We wander into the local mechanics yard, tools, broken down four-wheel drives and caravans everywhere. But where's the mechanic? Anyhow, finally locate him in a shipping container, and he directs us to the local Century battery distributor with a mobile number. A call and strange directions come. Find the butcher shop in a paddock near Sacia, then behind it in the bush you'll find a shipping container with me standing outside. Seems like everything happens around shipping containers up here. Anyhow, there he is. He casually looks at the battery. "Yeah, mate, I got one. Do you want heavy duty?" "Great," says Harry, and in she goes. Now, if you want to pay by card, you'll have to find my wife in a van behind the green church across the road from the mobile servo. We drive off from the totally casual and trusting battery man and find the green church. No assurances or notes of exchange, just an unspoken promise. That's the way of the Cape. Anyhow, the didn't have a clue wife asks us, "How much did my husband say it'd be?" $300. No worries. The equally trusting wife swipes Harry's card and we're on our way. Anyhow, the ferry carries us back across the Jardine River just before the noon lunch break. 2 hours later, we're driving down the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range to a little beach called Captain Billy Landing. Now, it's named after an Aboriginal from the 1800s who called himself Captain Billy. A barge landing was made by Camelco in the 1960s to load cattle for Bamaga and Weipa. But today, it lies in ruins. Anyhow, the word is to camp back off the beach because it's very exposed to the southeast trade winds that have been blowing very strong for the past few days, but supposed to be coming down tonight, according to weatherman Harry. Anyhow, the big Harry is trying to get his fire going. So far, he's stuffing it up pretty well. At least the smoke is keeping the mozzies away. Oh no, he comes out with a battery-powered blower. Now we'll have a furnace. He must have half of Shadeview's tools in the back of the ute. And he pulls out his battery-powered circular saw to cut our firewood into short lengths. Oh, nice. Anyhow, a gentle southeast breeze blows into the night as we watch the fire burn down to red coals. Time to boil the billy and enjoy another cup of tea and discuss the world's problems and delights. Harry's still knocking down a cordial and coke as I wander off to bed. Anyhow, 2 other campers share the couple of acres. One, a middle-aged woman from New South Wales, touring by herself in a clapped-out Mitsubishi van with more mechanical problems than a junkyard wreck. No way, says Harry, and we stand scratching our heads in disbelief. Anyhow, glorious night with almost full moon and a cool breeze. No mozzies, generators or lights except the 2 flashes every 8 seconds from the powerful lighthouse on Hannibal Island about 10 kilometres out on the edge of the shipping channel. Now the lights of ships occasionally glide by on the horizon.
Saturday, the 25th of August.
Somewhere around 5:30, I wake to the rhythmic sound of waves and high tide, and away in the distance a high-altitude A380 flying in from Hong Kong or Japan or Korea. Actually, there seems to be a procession of jets that follow each other. By their vapour trails, they fly in over the tip and then turn south. Blissfully unaware they are waking me up. Noisy neighbours. Oh well, welcome to Saturday the 25th of August. Harry's bacon and eggs and coffee go down well. Mrs. Mechanical Nightmare leaves to somewhere called Gunshot Creek camping site, which is apparently the notorious creek crossing on the old telegraph track. Now, many a vehicle has gone to junkyard heaven attempting to cross. Check it out on YouTube sometime. Anyhow, a bath in the sea and a shave and clean clothes. Not sure if I'll ever get the red dust or stain out of my shirts or my skin for that matter. Hey, hello, here comes the police along with fisheries and wildlife ranger in their Zodiac patrol boat. Apparently their mothership is some 40 kilometres away over the horizon, probably anchored in some reef pulling in coral trout. Anyhow, they wade ashore and check our permits and car licences and have a general chat. I asked if they have any ice to trade. No such luck. Anyhow, all happy, they jump into their boat and disappear over the horizon. We settle back to the intensity of relaxing in the shade under the pandanus trees on the beach at Captain Billy's Landing. Harry rolls another mozzie coil. Kickback. Hey, let's explore the bat caves along the beach, comes some mumbling. Okay. Then in an hour or so we muster up enough energy when we find half a dozen caves and 1 or 2 little bats scooting about. After a futile search for oysters, we retreat to our seats back in the shade on the beach for another cold drink. The southeast breeze picks up to a gale, and by midnight is threatening to blow my little tent to pieces, but it holds and I survive the tempest. Only one other camper at this remote spot, and after a short chat after breakfast, they disappear up the cliff face and on their way to a place called Chili Beach. By now we have a standard morning routine. I make a brew, Harry cooks bacon and eggs, I wash up, we pack our gear. 10 a.m. is always our bump out time. No one's keeping a time clock, but I awake with the sunrise. Big H staggers out after about an hour later, and stuff just seems to happen at a laid-back pace. Cape time. Anyhow, we navigate the 30 k's back to the main road. It always seems shorter on the way out. Anyhow, the road is running south along the top end of the Great Dividing Range, which gradually disappears behind us to the north and into the sea. Well, we note the sign to the crazy Shotgun Creek, the place where you go to watch and get a video of some clown riding off a $100,000 four-wheel drive trying to cross a creek at a stupid place. They say one gets damaged every day. Well, we decide to give the entertainment a miss and head for Bramble Roadhouse for ice, and then on to the historic Moreton Telegraph Station for lunch. Now, the telegraph line was first constructed in 1887 to connect the top end of Cape York, that is Somerset, to the rest of Australia. It was a simple single-wire earth return circuit using galvanised steel wire, basically fencing wire, on Oppenheimer galvanised steel poles. The white ants are prolific in the Cape and would have destroyed a wooden pole in months. The line required maintenance and repeater stations every couple of 100 kilometres, like Moreton. Now, in 1987, the line was replaced by a microwave link carrying hundreds of calls simultaneously. Today, fibre optic cables run all over the Cape for data and for thousands of calls. Anyhow, we grab a hot pie and a cold juice and head for Archer River. Well, the road crosses the top end of Archer River, which is now a shallow freshwater stream with lots of people lounging around on the sandy banks and in the cool water. Beer in one hand, backside in the water, and with laughing and slurred conversation coming from the mouth. I don't think anyone's listening. The river must be a raging torrent in the wet. Anyhow, we set up camp a couple of 100 metres or so up the road on a grassy site with about 50 other top-end adventurers and talk ourselves happy as the shadows grow longer. Close of program for Saturday.
Sunday, the 26th of August.
Crash, thump, and my world is a crazy jumble of distorted tent, and I soon realise a large branch has broken off the overhead tree and crashed over me. At pushing the distorted tent into shape, I managed to unzip the door and clamber out to Harry's calling out, "Are you okay, mate?" "Yeah, all good." And he goes back to sleep. Anyhow, a neighbour helps me remove the giant branch and the tent appears undamaged. I crawl back inside and there's a giant spider about the size of my hand staring at me. "Go away," I say. "This is not a good time." He crawls off to hide in the sand under my tent. Oh, welcome to Sunday, 5:30 a.m. Anyhow, usual breakfast and all the time hoping my washing from last night would be dry. Now, in my thriftness, I opted to wash by hand in a dish instead of the $6 washing machine, so I just pegged my unspun, dripping clothes on the line and hoped for the best. No such luck. Still damp, so into a plastic bag to dry on a fence rail later on. Cowan is a little town that services the Cape and is the first mobile phone signal we have had for days. Our phones light up with messages, Facebook and emails. Oh boy, we grab some ice and sort out our messages, etc. Then on to Musgrave Roadhouse for a bit of diesel and a hot pie lunch. Here we head east into the Lakefield National Park. Now, the Lakefield National Park is dust and savanna grasslands with numerous waterholes and creeks that form the North Kennedy and Normanby rivers, which flow into the Princess Charlotte Bay. They're absolutely infested with crocodiles, so definitely no swimming or camping on the banks close to the water. Anyway, there's a swirl of dust as we drive past the campsites of Sweetwater Lagoon and Law Lake, Saltwater and Hannah Creek. There's thousands of termite mounds that stand in this area in the treeless, grassy paddocks. We thunder on down the dusty corrugated gravel to a place where the road to the Princess Charlotte Bay crosses the Normanby River. The campsite is Kalpow. I write my National Park permit number on a sheet of paper and we set up camp for the night.
Monday, the 27th of August.
Well, it's 7 a.m, and from the snoring I suspect Harry is still alive, but out to it. Just depends on how much cordial he had last night before bed. It may be a slow start. Time for a brew. Anyhow, checked out the river for crocs, all quiet. It wasn't all quiet last night when a group of bikers got a few tubes under them and decided to try out their bikes around midnight. Yes, we all woke up to the barking exhaust noise. They settled down eventually, so all good. Anyhow, the water across the causeway was only about 100 metres long and about 300 millimetres deep, so we had to do the crossing just to get a photo. Did that. Anyhow, headed south towards Old Laura Homestead. Now, the original lease for Laura was taken up by two Irishmen. One was a butcher and one wanted to provide beef to the Cooktown area. So they established a cattle station on the Laura River in the 1880s. Now the house and shed were built around 1900 and, would you believe, are still standing. The homestead, butchering shed, stockyard, workshop and saddle sheds. Stockman's quarters in the area, and they're in amazing condition and a real glimpse into the past era of pioneers. Then we're on to Cooktown, about 110 clicks over gravel road and a couple of mountain ranges that form part of the Great Divide. Places like Battle Camp Range and Lookout Range. Then after a good pub counter lunch, we start looking for a camping park. We somehow stumble into the most expensive camping park in town. "A non-powered site, please, love," I say to the prim and proper receptionist in the air-conditioned office. "Oh, sorry, sir, only powered sites in this park." Looking at the dirty smelling red dusted pair, an equally dirty ute with a look of, my God, look what the dog dragged in. Anyhow, after a collective gasp at the $50 a night fee, we chose a nice grassy site close to the showers and laundry. It was time we exercised both showers and laundry. Anyhow, quiet night, no bikers, no road trains, falling branches, huge spiders, barking crocs, mosquitoes, attacking crows, scrub turkeys, dog dragging ball and chain, wailing curlews and aggressive kicking kangaroos, only Harry snoring away in his Taj Mahal tent. Pretty boring, really. Anyhow, saw my first TV news this morning after 2 weeks. Looks like same stuff, just different day. Tuesday the 26th of August. The Captain Cook Museum was worth the entrance fee. Lots of interesting stuff. There's nothing like standing on the actual site where history was made. On the 11th of June 1770, Captain Cook's ship, the 30-metre, 366-tonne Endeavour, ran aground 40 kilometres offshore on the Great Barrier Reef. He managed to breach the ship, careened that is, in other words, grounded at high tide and laid her on her side to inspect and repair the damage, in the town's river now called the Endeavour. Anyhow, after an hour or so at the museum, I now know a whole lot of fancy nautical terms. Kedging anchors, frothing, warped, careened, or what about electric chain, otherwise known as a lightning rod that Cook had ordered rigged to the Endeavour mast to prevent serious damage from lightning strikes. Anyhow, with all this knowledge, I talk Harry silly while he drives. We are both captive audiences as we spend hours rambling on about all sorts of stuff. While driving, I talk and he listens. When we're at camp at night, he talks and I listen. Often dropping off to sleep with micro naps while he rambles on, oblivious to the fact I've missed whole sentences. Never mind, I just grunt like I've heard it all and he keeps going blissfully unaware. Anyhow, we grab a coffee at a roadside van, wish we hadn't, terrible. Anyhow, down to the Archer Point where a couple of campers are enduring the southeast gale that's blowing hard. Anyway, we head on down the Mulligan Highway to the incredible Black Mountain National Park. It's truly breathtaking. The national park's distinctive mountains of grey granite boulders, blackened by a film of microscopic blue-green algae growing on the exposed surfaces. They say cold rains falling on the dark, heated granite boulders causes the boulders to progressively fracture, break and slowly disintegrate, sometimes explosively. Anyhow, these formidable boulders, some the size of houses, are stacked precariously on one another, appearing to defy both gravity and logic. Anyhow, a number of people and animals have wandered onto these mountains, never to be seen again. Quite a dangerous and mysterious place. Anyhow, leaving the Mulligan Highway, we point south towards Daintree National Park, keeping one eye out for the Vietnamese boat people who illegally came ashore a couple of days ago. Anyhow, the police had found all but two, the captain and his mate. We had to stop at the infamous Lion's Den pub, along with every other traveller, took us some photos and moved on. The roads in the rainforest start to challenge us, but Harry and his trusty Isuzu D-Max are up to it. We cross the Bloomfield River at the Aboriginal community of Watchawatchet and start to hit the really steep grades of the four-wheel drive track. There always seems to be one or two idiots going way too fast on these black back block roads. Oh, Harry has a few adjectives to express his feelings as they scream by in the other direction. Anyhow, bitumen again at the Daintree River barge, and the 2 Vietnamese from the wrecked boat have been detained by police at this crossing just a few hours ago. While we're on the barge, a poor couple get their caravan jammed on the exit ramp on the barge. We drive off and leave the barge attendants to try and sort it out and cruise on to Ellis Beach for the night. With bitumen all the way home, I remind Harry to reinflate the tyres to the correct pressure. Got it covered, Ross, first thing in the morning. Sat on Ellis Beach with a cold drink and watched the full moon rise over the ocean. Last night, sleeping under our tents, and the conversation turns to our wives. They only like to camp under 5 stars, not the whole universe. And we think that they were glad to get rid of us for 2 weeks. Anyhow, as much as Harry and I have enjoyed each other's company over the past 2 weeks, it pales when we consider our wives. And besides, we've run out of clean clothes and food. Oh, the male of the species. Anyhow, we reckon Etty Bay, just south of Innisfail, would be a good place to enjoy fish and chips for lunch, and so it was. I dropped my red, dirt-ingrained stuff on the front veranda, enjoyed a hug from my wife and a real hot shower. Home again. Well, 3,500 kilometres, 350 litres of diesel, 15 days, 12 campsites, dozens of bags of ice and heaps of bacon and eggs, tea and coffee, millions of photos, along with hours and hours of good conversation with a great mate. Cape York, the great escape. Ah, life's good. You know, sometimes all you need is a great friend and a thirst for adventure.
This is the end of The Great Escape. The fourth adventure was in 2019, where Ross Taylor and Bob Sullivan spent 2 weeks exploring Fraser and Bribie Islands. This adventure is called 2 Men, 2 Weeks, 2 Islands.
Hey, do you ever have one of those days when you make a phone call to an old mate and then nostalgia kicks in? You start fantasising about things you used to do 50 years or so ago. Then before you know it, you're making plans for a new adventure together. Well, I suggested to my old mate Bob, hey, how about you and I do a couple of weeks together on Fraser Island? I've got the 4-wheel drive and all the camping gear, Bob says. He lives at Caboolture, only about an hour north of the Brisbane airport. That's halfway there. And no sooner do I hang up and I think, maybe these 70-year-old codgers are writing cheques their bodies can't cash. No, ignore that thought. Live in denial. So, what date? How long? What food? How much water? Where do we start from? Noosa, Harvey Bay or Inskip Point? How can I fit it into my busy schedule? Busy schedule? I'm retired. Anyhow, you know, once upon a time I'd work all day, come home, mow the lawn, wash the car and be at a 7 p.m. meeting, then pay the bills online before going to bed. Now all of Wednesday is taken up going shopping. Thursday's mowing the lawn, Friday's washing the car, Sunday is church. Oh, wow, too busy for anything now. I'm retired. Hey, hi Bob, it's been a couple of weeks since we talked. Are you still keen on Fraser Island trip? Well, yes, he says, but I've just got a few details on what you are thinking so I can plan the trip. Plan? The word splats like a bug on the windscreen of my adventure vision as I realise we are 2 of a kind, both planners, on the same one trip together in the same 4-wheeler. You know, times, dates, fly in, fly out, stops, equipment, etc., etc. Lists of maps, tide cycles, moon phases, the whole 9 yards. Oh, this will be interesting. Never mind. I'll let him think he's the alpha male and she'll be right. But like 2 peas in a pod or 2 cows in a paddock, we're thinking the same, minimum gear, maximum fun, and we're going to take about 10 or 12 days. I'll fly into Brisbane on Monday the 21st of October, where Bob will meet me, and from there we'll head up to Inskip Point and camp for the night to wait for the ferry, the Manta Ray, to take us across to Fraser the next morning. And Bob volunteers to make a list of campsites, national park permits, necessary rations, fuel and water points, and a dozen other things. My answer is simply, okay, and I hang up and book my flights. Fraser Island is just off the Queensland east coast and is the world's largest sand island. It stretches 120 kilometres. All told, it covers 1,800 kilometres square with high points up to 800 feet and numerous freshwater lakes, spectacular ribbons of coloured sand and long beaches with rolling surf coming in off the Pacific Ocean. The whole island is a heritage site and an Australian national park. Now, the traditional owners are recognised as the Butchulla people, and they call the island Kagari. And there are several satellite islands like Slane, Tooth, Roundbush, Moonbeam, Gardner, Dream, Stewart and Reef Islands on the western side that make up the country of Fraser. Now, more than just sand, it has rainforests, eucalyptus trees, mangroves and peat swamps. The vegetation is absolutely abundant due to a fungus in the sand that releases nutrients for plants to grow. How about that? Anyhow, the most northern tip is Sandy Cape, and a lighthouse was built in 1870s and ran until about 1994. It's still there as a tourist attraction and accommodation for various environmental rangers. Anyhow, the most southern point is Hook Point, only a kilometre or so from Inskip Point on the mainland, and will be our barge crossing. Well, Thursday the 17th of October. We're only a few days from crossing the start line. Last-minute phone calls and watching a dozen YouTube clips on other intrepid four-wheelers navigating the sandy tracks. You're not allowed on Fraser with anything less than a four-wheel drive. They'll turn you around at the barge crossing. Both of us have been taking notes from the video clips, things like tyre pressures, snatch straps, recovery tracks, shovels, ropes and suitable camping gear. Anyhow, the phone calls between us have now reduced to under an hour and are closer to 3 or 4 minutes. Hey, have you thought of clothes pegs? Yep, all good. Camping and vehicle permits? Yep, all good. Okay, see you Monday morning. Anyhow, Bob tells me he paid a visit to the National Parks office in Noosa to get the latest on fires, fuel, campsites, etc., and reveals to me that the young woman behind the counter looked him up and down and quickly decided she was dealing with an old moth-eaten 70-plus who was taking his equally old moth-eaten mate on a Fraser adventure. Better make sure we put you old blokes in a safe dingo-fenced camping area. What she didn't know was that these couple of old blokes knew how to handle dingoes. Yes, sirree, the fence had been needed to protect those mongrel dingoes from these old seasoned bushmen. Yeah, right, whatever. If we were any more true blue, we would be on horses eating bush tucker and sleeping on swags under the stars. Whoops, just stepped back from daydreaming into reality. We'll be in a Toyota Land Cruiser with our personal tents, gas stoves, bottled water and blow-up air beds, sleep apnea machines, and we're all to go. The closest we'll get to bush tucker will be a meat pie from the bakery at Eurong Beach Resort. Anyhow, permits all sorted and paid for in advance for Central Station, Eli Creek, Dundubra and Waddy Point. Tide charts printed and highlighted so we know when to use the beach road. Now, road rules apply. You keep left, wear a seatbelt, 80 kilometres an hour is the maximum on the beach, slot slower on the inland tracks, and vehicles must be registered. We think we've covered everything. Now, for the past few weeks, like mice and men with best laid plans, we have made our appreciations, done our homework, assessed the objectives, considered a dozen battle strategies, discussed logistics, weather, moon, tides, and have come to a final plan. Now, like military planners, we have situation, mission, execution, logistics, administration, signals down pat and ready to assemble at the start line. Inskip Point, 5 p.m, 1700 hours, and I seem to hear the words of one of my commanding officers from military days. No plan of operation extends with certainty beyond the first encounter with the enemy's main strength. We'll see. Well, Monday the 21st of October, awake before the alarm, last minute stacking and packing, instructions to the wife, who at 5 a.m. is still non-compos mentis, kisses at the Townsville Airport drop zone, too early for the parking Gestapo, so actually able to hug and kiss without being told to move on and get a room. In fact, so early that there is no one at the departure gate, so I stand near a poster of the Cowboys football team just so I don't feel alone. Relax, enjoy the medium-sized latte and watch the seagulls fly around the tarmac. All good, I'm on my way. Hey, g'day mate, comes an all too familiar voice as Bob meets me at the Brisbane baggage carousel. Luggage in the car and we are navigating the traffic as we cruise north towards Caboolture. And we enjoy lunch with Bob's wife, Myrtle. Quick change of clothes and sort out stuff to take on the island. We grab the salad rolls and Myrtle waves us goodbye with a whispered instruction, hey, keep an eye on Bob, Ross. The instruction makes me think maybe he wanders off occasionally. It's okay. He won't go far. It's all soft sand. His walker frame will get bogged. Sweet. Anyhow, Bob's 19-year-old Toyota Land Cruiser is the 100 series 6-cylinder petrol and gas automatic with airbag, rear lifters and diff lock. Pirelli Scorpion ATR tyres, all just right for the trip ahead. She might be a bit long in the tooth, but she's still feeling it, he proudly announces as we wind up to 110 on which is the speed limit on the Bruce Highway heading north to Gympie, Rainbow Beach, and then finally Inskip Point for our night camp. Anyhow, 2 hours later, we grabbed the necessary tickets at Rainbow Beach to put our vehicle on the Manta Ray barge tomorrow morning, then head up the 10 kilometres to Inskip Point. It's about now I hear the sound of an old control manager as Bob looks at his watch and declares, oh, right on time, 4:30. We're setting benchmarks, times and schedules in place. We may not have a physical Gantt chart on the wall, but it's in Bob's head, and he's just moved the pin from there to here. First camp at Inskip was planned as our shakedown night. Time to find out where Myrtle had stowed all our gear. In the next 3 days, Myrtle's name would come up every time we couldn't find something, like Bob and I remembered where we'd put everything that we'd packed. So we had to have someone to blame. Tents, pegs, sleeping bags, mats, tables, chairs, stove, kitchen, saucepans. When an item wasn't where we expected, Bob would say, Myrtle must have packed that. Poor Myrtle. So few get the blame for so much. Anyhow, I get my brand new tent out of the box, unopened. Bob's identical tent had been opened and tried out in his backyard, but is now missing the main part. He only has the top fly, the fiberglass frame and the pegs, but no tent. Anyhow, controlled panic sets in as we search all the stuff in the back, then search again and then again. Finally, message Myrtle. Tick, 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 what did you do with Bob's tent? Of course, she's not going to have a clue. Half an hour later, and no response from Myrtle. Time to find the spare. Bob always carries a spare of everything. His favourite saying is belts and braces. I've been around a while, but needed him to explain this one. Forgive me, I'm from North Queensland. Some might rudely say a bit slow. Anyhow, a belt might be all that needed to hold your pants up, but added braces will make sure. You've heard of dad jokes and sayings. Well, this is right there with Grandpa's sayings. Anyhow, spares on the roof rack, Ross, comes the captain's order. Snap, snap, the bungee cords are off and I unroll the supposed spare. And hey presto, not a spare, but the original missing tent. All's well, and make a mental note to apologise to Myrtle for thinking she might have been responsible. Anyhow, night closes and I remember the big black snake that slithered across the path and into the scrub near our camp a couple of hours ago. He'll keep away, I convince myself, and we sit watching the stars winking in the blackness of space. Anyhow, the conversation wanders around old telecommunication days and we reminisce over good times. The night chills off and we slide into our sleeping bags for a good night's sleep. Well, Tuesday the 22nd. First light and 2 old-timers rise and move silently into a pack-up routine that will become quite slick over the next few days. A can of 2 fruits suffice for breakfast and we're rolling by 8 a.m. to catch the barge toward low tide. We have to drive off hard road, not a soft beach. Not a time to get bogged, so the Pirelli Scorpions are dropped to 18 pounds per square inch. or whatever that is in kilopascals. Anyhow, by letting your tyres down, you significantly increase the size of the tyre's footprint on the sand, so you have the same weight of vehicle spread over about twice as much rubber, and therefore half the weight per square inch. Anyhow, caps off, pressure gauge connected, and Bob starts the process. Hey, better slow down, we don't want to be too early. My scheduled time is 8:30, Bob quips. Oh no, I really am with a time and motion planner, I silently think to myself. Anyhow, the Manta Ray barge takes about 15 minutes, and at the command of a crew member, Bob fires up the Land Cruiser, and the Pirellis bite, grip and churn the soft sand of Hook Point, Fraser Island. We have crossed over. Now the tide's out, so we scoot along at a steady 70 or 80 clicks, and then at around about 24 kilometres up the beach, we hang a lefty into Dili Village, access road. Now, momentum is your friend in the very soft sand, and Bob gives the horses a bit of a kick as the four wheels rip up the steep climb, bouncing and lurching over the rough track. Now, all the gear piled in the back, Bob would say, neatly packed, humps and bumps, but it settles well. It's about now I realise I have the shock-absorbing passenger seat that was installed especially for Myrtle's comfort. Oh, thanks, Myrtle. Meanwhile, Bob tolerates the ordinary seat, briefly stopping at this time to see Dili Village, originally built as a sand mining camp, but is now an environmental education centre for University of Sunshine Coast. We are now on the Inland Lakes Drive to the dingo-fenced campground called Central Station. Good old Bob navigates the cruiser through the ruts and bumps, and he powers through the soft sand at about 15 kilometres an hour. Sometimes he lets me know when to expect a crashing large hole or a tree root, but most times I just scrape myself off the lining with him saying, "Whoops, sorry." You gotta love him. Anyhow, the first lake is Boomergen and is quite spectacular considering the entire island is sand. It is a tea tree lake with a little stain of pale red-brown from the surrounding tea trees, which give off the red-brown appearance as well as its name. Anyhow, despite its watercolour, it's actually a clean, pure water system and a great swimming spot. We decide to press on to Lake Birrabeen, just up the road. Once again, the pale tea-coloured fresh water is cool and inviting. Not to mention it's been 2 days without a shower, so into our cozies and splish-splash we're taking a bath. Well, no soap, but very refreshing. Then a couple of muesli bars, a bottle of water, and lunch is taken care of. On to Central Station. No, not the railway station, but our fenced-in dingo-proof camp. Now, this large clearing was once the headquarters for Fraser Islands forestry operations from about 1920s through to the 1950s. It had around about 30 houses and a school that were built for families and children of the loggers. The mature karri pines, bunya pines and sardonyes and flooded gums were planted about 95 years ago to create a display botanical garden. Our campsite is elevated, level and sports an excellent bush table with running water nearby. Now the toilet blocks have hot showers as long as you have $2 coins. Good old Bob has a bottle full under the seat. Oh, good lad. Anyhow, we found out that some of them gobble your money but no hot water. Cold it is. Bob's idea was to sit there waiting for somebody else to try the water, and when they found out that it worked, then you line up outside. He got some pretty strange looks while standing there with a towel wrapped around himself, loitering in the shower block for someone else to finish. Bob who? Never heard of the man. Anyhow, we sit in the dark. Of course, somebody forgot the camp lantern. We have stopped blaming Myrtle. She's been replaced by the mythical somebody. Anyhow, we ramble on about stuff I know I won't remember next morning, so we'll probably repeat ourselves tomorrow night. It's only about 8 o'clock and I realise Bob is talking and I'm drifting off to sleep, but I awake enough to give him an aha and an okay at the right times, so my mate thinks I'm still there. Time for bed is the vote, and the sleep apnea machines hum into life and two old codgers disappear into their respective caves to sleep. Wednesday the 23rd. My God, why are kookaburras so loud at 5 a.m? Then an air-shattering crow's call a metre from my tent launches me into a new day, and it's time for a brew. Bob has already wandered off somewhere. GPS tracker is needed for him. Hope he can find his way from the shower block. Anyhow, here he comes, freshly showered and shaved bright as a button. Meanwhile, I'm slothfully slouched in one of Bob's camp chairs, which is terrifyingly rickety. I actually fell out of it last night, much to Bob's enjoyment. Anyhow, I'll just keep journaling while Bob fluffy ducks around making breakfast. Pretty high-level culinary stuff. Half a can of peaches on 3 Weet-Bix and a splash of long-life milk. Oh, life's good. Hey, this trip is going to be interesting. We have 2 guys who love to plan in detail and think ahead. I'm amazed how we both think the same issues and make plans separately, only to find the other is doing the same and coming to the same conclusions. Take last night, for example. Now, before going to bed, we cracked open the map and discussed the next day. Then in the middle of the night, I'm lying awake, running through the tide times and realise that we need to be on the beach part of the trip at low tide and not high, so we have hard sand. Now, to do this, we need to reverse our planned trip from clockwise to anti-clockwise and drive along the beach in the morning. Yep, I'll talk to Bob in the morning. Anyhow, over breakfast, Bob pipes up and says, "Hey, I woke in the middle of the night and thought we had to reverse our direction of travel to fit the morning low tide." How about that? Anyhow, quick check of the tide chart, and low is at 9:30, ideal. We are both on the same page. Time for a coffee and toast smothered with honey. Good old Bob kept forgetting which side of the wire mesh toaster should be up, and as a result, burnt toast had to be scraped a few times before covering with honey. No one wanted to get into conversation about burnt toast being carcinogenic. So off to explore the road to Eurong and the eastern beach, and then north to Hammerstone Sandblow and Wabi Lake. First problem is to navigate out of Central Station and get on the one-way track system. A couple of times we find ourselves lost. Actually, men don't get lost, we're just exploring new routes. Anyhow, we were guilty of blocking the traffic by our indecision on where to turn. It's complicated, but other drivers look at us like, well, a couple of old grandpas, and they wait patiently. Anyhow, we grind our way through the soft sand with huge drops and exposed tree roots quite slowly, and an average probably about 15 kilometres an hour. Now, from time to time, we get a lineup of young blokes behind us, all wanting to show how their Range Rover or VW, Amarok or the Nissan Patrol is the fastest, and they are king of the road. Anyhow, Bob just smiles and says, they can wait. Anyhow, a couple of 100 metres along, there's a widening of the track, and we slide over, pull our rear vision mirrors in, and they squeeze past, all with a polite wave. Anyhow, halfway to Eurong, in the middle of nowhere, our mirrors are suddenly filled with the thundering black mass of a tourist bus, like some giant military monster vehicle with massive tyres and high clearance, breathing fire from its blazing high beam lights and obviously wanting to pass at high speed. Anyhow, might wins and we yield, sliding off into the soft edges of as a dozen tourists wave at us from their air-conditioned, elevated, air-cushioned seats, videoing us getting bogged to the axles. We grimace and graciously wave back. Oh, someone will bless them, just not us today. Anyhow, Eurong is a sight for sore eyes, a resort, supermarket, ice, petrol, and best of all, a bakery with fresh hot pies. Now, the peppered steak and potato-topped pies slip down our gullets with the greatest of ease. 10:30, time to move before the tide gets us, come the captain's command. So Bob, the rally driver, puts the heel to the steel and hits the soft sand of the churned-up beach access at 100 kilometres an hour, and I survive the next 30 seconds. And we're now cruising north along the smooth beach sand. He sharpens my prayer life, the lad does. The clear sky, blue sea, rolling waves sliding by at 70 kilometres an hour as the cool breeze floods the open car. Don't get any better than this, Bob, I say. No, he's California dreaming. Anyhow, we start singing our latest songs, Pretty Woman Walking Down the Street or Don't Take Your Guns to Town, Son. It's then I discover Bob has a tape player in his car. Not only that, but he still has cassette tapes in the glove box. Oh, but I refrain from trying one for fear of it getting jammed up. He assures me he has heard of CDs and actually has one of Roy Orbison's somewhere in the same glove box. We think we can sing better than the CD and continue the fun. Now, you've heard the phrase dad jokes. Well, if you're with us, you would hear us amuse ourselves with grandpa jokes. They are even better. Like Bob would ask someone, "Have you seen the dead seagulls?" as he casually looks up. They instinctively follow and look up. At that point, he cracks up when they look up for dead seagulls. Oh, God, did I have to explain it? I'll move on. Anyhow, aircraft land at various parts of the beach. And as we pass the orange markers every so often that designate the areas where you need to keep a sharp eye out, so no one lands on you. Anyhow, we soon discover that the air tour operators have vehicles that block off the traffic just prior to a plane landing, so relax. Anyhow, keep your eye out for Cornwall's road access, comes the captain's call. Oh, there it is as we scream by. Now, Bob does a big U-turn on the beach, pretending he hadn't missed it at all, but wanted to approach from the northern side. Yeah, right. Anyhow, we hit the soft sand at speed and keep going. Remember, momentum is your friend as we career up the Cornwall's track to the back of Lake Wabi. Now, Lake Wabi is gradually being eaten by a hammerstone sand blow that is moving under the constant bombardment of the southeast trade winds. Now, we enjoyed the observation from the viewing platform high up on the western side before heading off looking for the remnants of a century-old historic Mackenzie jetty, just a short distance south of Kingfisher Bay Resort, and apparently Prince Harry visited last year. But no, the road is closed to us mere commoners. Oh well. During the 1900s, right through to the 1980s, Mackenzie's jetty was used for the timber industry, transporting carapine and satinay logs for furniture. Also, blackbutt and tallow wood were hardwoods for general construction, and hoot pine for plywood. Anyhow, back at Central Station, the night routine sets in. All is quiet until someone spots a huge snake slithering under our car. Torches flash back and forth, and Bob quickly identifies it as a python. He's immediately recognised as the snake expert and continues the illusion by entertaining the tourist with scary snakes in your tent stories. We all watch this harmless carpet snake, about 2 and a bit metres long and as thick as your wrist, wriggle across the sand and through a patch of undergrowth toward the young couple occupying the tent next door. Now, the poor girl was definitely not happy with this big slithering monster in close proximity, and we watched the entertainment as her boyfriend tried to settle her anxiety by attempting to track its every movement over the next hour or so. She did not want to go to bed until the monster was contained. The snake just wanted to get away from us all. Meanwhile, the stars skipped through the treetops. Bob and I discussed and solved 100 problems of the world, and thinking of the hysterical couple next door, tell each other scary experiences that we've had over the past 70 years. Anyhow, the eyelids close and Wednesday fades to black. Thursday the 24th. Somebody must have shot the noisy, laughing kookaburras because they let me sleep until 5 a.m. Bob's already gone, soaking under the $2 3-minute hot showers. Now, when 3 minutes are up, the hot water cuts off, bang, and all you have is cold, or you pay the piper another $2. Somehow I lost my $2 and had to suffer under a cold shower. No sympathy from my mate. Breakfast, pack up and on the road again. The two of us are now working like a well-oiled machine. We've even got most things in their right place and found most stuff that Myrtle had hidden in devious places. The 10-kilometre track through the bush down to Yurong and onto the east coast takes a comfortable 45 minutes, and we find ourselves once again delighting in a hot pie from the one and only bakery. Now, the tides govern beach driving. At low tide, you have easy, hard sand and cruise to 60-80 kilometres an hour. High tide, and you're up in the soft, bumpy, rut-gouged stuff grinding under lots of power at 15 kilometres an hour. High tide makes getting around rocky outcrops difficult, and either running between surf sets or navigating the extreme overland bypasses. Now, most of the rocks are actually a compacted black sand, like soft sandstone, and easily scraped with a sharp blade or undercarriage of car. So we let others carve the track for us. Bob tells me that there are only a few outcrops of real volcanic rock on the island. I guess I'll see the phenomena later. Anyhow, right now we are surrounded by vast masses of fine siliceous sand. So we're out on the beach at 10:30 for the low tide. Cruising north, we passed One Tree Rocks, our black sedimentary rocks out in the surf, and stopped briefly at Lake Wabi walking track. We quickly decide it's too nice a day to spoil with a blistering hot walk over glaring white sands of the Hammerstone sandblow that we've already seen from the other side anyway. Anyhow, we scoot further north past Poison and Yiddy Rocks and note the beach access to Happy Valley. Then on to our campsite. Checking out a good-looking place among the she-oak trees at Gullaroo, we notice a lot of dingo footprints and a half-buried dead animal in the sand. A unanimous vote as we decide to move north up the beach to Eli Camp. Our Eli campsite looks great, and a secluded place on the dunes appeals to us both. Deal done, tents up, we own it. Now, the famous Eli Creek is just a few clicks up the beach, and we don our cozies and flotation tubes and join the 100 other fun lovers riding the cold, clear freshwater stream as it pours out about 4 million litres onto the beach every hour. Now, the water level does not change much and is about a foot deep as Bob and I try to float with the current. And we actually look more like two stranded whales. But it was very refreshing on such a hot day. Okay, been there, done that. We scamper off to try and beat the high tide back to our campsite. Now, the soft sand throws the cruiser all over the place in uncoordinated, jerking motions, a bit like Midnight Oil's Peter Garrett gyrations while on stage. Anyhow, a cup of tea on the beach and sunsets over the sand dunes behind us, causing long shadows to stretch over our camp, then darkness. Suddenly, the word dingo punctuates our conversation. Flashes of torch and a full-grown dingo 4 metres away is staring us down. We both stand and he backs away and slowly walks past along the track. Anyhow, half an hour later, the skyline along the beach to the south lights up as several four-wheelers roar towards us in the most impressive array of LED bar and driving lights illuminating the whole area for miles. They would have come across on the last barge of the day, and we watched the night's entertainment from our beachfront chairs, not realising that the mongrel dingoes are up on our table stealing our sugar bowl. We only notice it when we return the few paces back to our tents to make a brew. It's then we find our tea and sugar gone and big sandy paw prints up on the table. We scour the bush and tracks only to find the tea container unopened, but the sugar was long gone. Suddenly, out of the darkness, I am confronted with the steely glare of 2 hungry dingoes. Now, the instinctive reaction could be to run, but the controlled reaction is to stand still and hold your ground. I hear Bob's voice come up behind me as together we face our foe. It's then that I notice the huge rusty machete in Bob's hand at his side, and I really feel for my safety. I had a flash vision of Bob and the dingoes locked in mortal combat, with me caught in the middle. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Oh well, I've at least had my tetanus shots. It's the classic Mexican standoff. Finally, the dogs blink and move on. We lock everything away in the car, double zip our tents, and we crash out for the night. Well, Friday the 25th. This is a beautiful sunrise after a cold night. With brew in hand, we stroll along the tracks nearby to find our opened sugar container with teeth marks and sugar spread across the ground. Oh well, dingoes won, campers nil. Life goes on. Anyhow, I go down to the beach to see if I can still catch beach worms. They are usually quite common. They can grow to be about 2 metres in length and are excellent bait, but no luck, just wet shorts. Then I turn around only to be face to face with a sugar-stealing mongrel dingo. He must have thought I had some fish scraps or something. He turned with a look of contempt, stupid tourist, and strolls back up the beach into the scrub. Anyhow, camping under the she oak trees is nice as they whisper in the breeze, but on a still night they discharge saltwater drops and our tents are covered with salt crystals. Myrtle will have to wash these tents when we get back, Bob says. Call me sometime and let me know how that request goes down, I mumble, and suggest he checks his hospital cover is paid before offering that command. I keep riding, sitting in the shade. Bob's packing the car, sweeping the tents, adjusting and readjusting something. No idea what he's doing, but he seems to be occupied and I can keep an eye on him. He's happy while he's doing something. Also keeps him quiet and saves him getting lost. All I have to do is jump in the passenger seat and we're away. That's teamwork, eh? Anyhow, sliding, grinding through the soft sand, bumping across numerous freshwater flows, coming out of the sand dunes, navigating the black sandstone beach rocks, and we arrive at Eli Creek again. This time, rather than do the beached whale thing again, we go for a walk in the crystal clear cold water. Now, dozens of families are already here for the day, with gazebos and deck chairs set up along the sandy edge of the creek. Kids are playing, sitting, floating on car tubes, pumped up crocodiles, unicorns, rubber ducks and 100 other devices. Beach umbrellas, eskies, cold drinks, combined with people just having fun. Wearing togs of various styles from fully covered to very little, and at the end of the day there will be some with mozzie bites in very unusual places. Tourist buses and planes are coming and going. Oh, it's all happening. Time to continue northbound while the tide is low. Well, the sun is shining, blue skies, foaming surf crashing to our right, and in the distance up ahead looms the skeletal remains of the Maheno, a New Zealand 5,000-ton steel-hulled ship built in Scotland in 1905. Now, at the end of her commercial life in 1935, she was under tow caught in a cyclone. The tow rope broke and she beached on Fraser Island. Today she is just 120 metres of rusting hulk, but being seen and photographed by millions of tourists. She's probably earning more money now as a tourist attraction than she ever did in her working life. Anyhow, we clamber all over her and wade through the rusting wreckage only to eventually find and read the one and only sign that says keep away by 3 metres. Penalty and fines apply to anyone clambering about her. Bob made me do it. It's his fault. Anyhow, Cathedrals on Fraser is a private camping ground and the place for an ice cream. Several holiday units are available along with petrol in a small shop and a time to replace the sugar that the mongrel dingoes stole. Now, the cathedrals and the pinnacles up the beach get their name from the towering cliffs and ridges of coloured sands. Black, white, yellow, red and all in between. So we stop to take a few pics as a kid scurries under the fence with the sign that says, keep out, no taking coloured sands. His mum quickly hides the bottle full of sand he was carrying and they trundle off. Bob just says, g'day, as they pass on the track. Dundubra, near Wongal Sandblow, is our fenced-in campsite for the next 2 nights. No sugar-stealing mongrels allowed in. The dog-proof fence and electrified gates across the road assures that the dingoes are kept at bay. Anyhow, Bob's still trying to work out how his stove table is supposed to fold up. He's absolutely convinced it folds into a locked flat state. I try to help him but only make things worse, so leave him to frustrate himself for another hour. Such is life. I kick back for another snooze when I hear a chorus of mumbling, cranking expletives that come together as I'm blankety blank over it, followed by the crashing of a still unfolded stove table being hurled into the back of the cruiser. Anyhow, huge blood-sucking flies called march flies discover us and try to extract juice from any exposed part of the body that they can find. We become experts at dispatching them to the insect afterlife. By now we're seeing the same campus turn up at various spots and stories are swapped of 100 amazing adventures as each one tries to outdo the other. The legendary creek crossings, the sand hills climbed, the rocks avoided, the fish caught, the toilet blocks endured. Oh, the list goes on. Hey, Saturday the 26th. We vote for a slack day at Dundubra as a large sand goanna invades our space, then wanders off. Now the track up to Wongal Sandblow looks easy, so with water and bottles and dingo whackers in hand, we go out through the wire and wander along the 2-kilometre track to the Sandblow. Our walks are so slow that when I do a videotape of us walking, I edit it later by increasing the speed to 120% just to bring some normality. Anyhow, an hour or so later, we crash back into our shady campsite for a snooze. It's been a big morning. We climb aboard the old cruiser and chug slowly down the beach to the cathedrals on Fraser to indulge in a chocolate caramel magnum. That's late lunch taken care of. However, about an hour later, Bob's hungry again, so we break out the sardines in tomato sauce, a packet of chips and a bottle of olives. We cram these between 2 pieces of bread and afternoon tea is put away. Oh, the intense pace of life on Fraser. Anyhow, being in no hurry, we often drive along the beach at about 30 kilometres an hour and everyone else is doing 80. Today we had a group of cars coming towards us and another group coming up from our rear. Good old Bob just keeps the cruiser in the middle like some traffic island. Cars to the left, cars to the right, and I'm stuck in the middle with Bob. Hey, that's the second time I've mentioned those lines. It must be a song. I'll bet Bob's got an old cassette tape somewhere that he's playing while I'm asleep, so I subliminally it seeps into my subconscious. The man's a legend, a scary legend. Whoops, Bob's wandered off again. I definitely need a GPS tracker to keep track of him. He'll be off talking to some camper somewhere, telling his grandpa jokes. He usually comes home before dark. He's a good lad. Anyhow, the afternoon entertainment has started. Watching vehicles loaded to the gunnels with sunburnt occupants searching for a good nesting place for the night. Now, finding a place, they begin the ritual of setting up, building their temporary booths to shelter in for the night. Most couples work in silence until the inevitable muttering of, "Where are the ropes? Did you put the buckets in?" Then there is the laughter of children playing cricket or something. Someone has just started, I can hear, playing a guitar and singing some country music. Anyhow, the sound floats like a sweet fragrance among the quiet trees as the sun slides below the western sandhills. By 7, they'll all be hushed silence as the tired children settle and couples embrace in the cool night. Bob and I just share old war stories and the days of watermelon wine as we both drift in and out of micro-sleeps, occasionally interrupted by the scooting by of some feral animal like a bandicoot or a possum. And Sunday the 27th, 5 a.m, and the soft grey of dawn highlights the ribs and stitchings of my tent, the soft zinging of Bob's tent zipper as he slithers out of his cave, and 100 different bird calls gently punctuate the morning glory. It's time to greet the day. Everything outside is covered with tiny flowers here from the paperbark melaleuca trees, and they seem to stick to everything. Their soft, gentle fragrance certainly fills your senses. Well, it's brew time. Wheat Bix and fruit toast with peanut butter and honey, followed by a coffee, has become the standard fare for breakfast. Now, the showers are good here, except without $2 coins, no shower, hot or cold. A young French guy wanders over last night begging to exchange his $1 coin for $2 coins. I gave him mine, but I think he would have given $5 for the $2 just so he and his girlfriend could have a hot shower. Now, after explaining the $2 only lasted for 3 minutes, he decided they would have to shower together to maximise use. Good idea, says Bob, and the Frenchman wanders off into the twilight towards his camp. We're heading north to Waddy Point and on to Orchid Beach and the Camp Zone 8 for our base camp tonight for the push to the most northern point of Sandy Cape. We are sick of dingoes harassing us and stealing our sugar, the mongrels, so we'll be trying to get a permit to camp in the enclosed Waddy Point. It was fully booked a fortnight ago, but we'll try to make a few phone calls, pull a few strings, flash our grandpa cards and see if any spots have loosened up. Otherwise, beach camping in the open at Malu or Ocean Lake or Darling in Zone 8. Low tide is at 1 o'clock this arvo, so no rush, kick back. Oh, Bob's lost again. I'll put on a cup of tea and he'll appear out of somewhere. Probably found some campers to exchange travel stories with. He'll run through 20 questions with them. Where you been? Where you going? How long you staying for? What's the road like? What are you driving? Been here before? Then he'll move into family history, and by the time he's finished, he'll know them to 3 generations ago and how they're related by marriage to his 3rd removed cousin on his grandmother's side. The man is known for his ability to mine deep for information. He's a legend. You got a keeper there, Myrtle. By the way, I've noticed we stopped blaming Myrtle for things we can't find and started blaming each other, or the sugar-toothed dingoes, or the enormous blood-sucking flies. The blood-sucking march flies are particularly attached to Bob, so I sit him down as a feeding place and they leave me alone. That's what mates are for, isn't it? And it's a glorious day out on the beach and heading north to Indian Head. Need to go inland to get around the headland and through very soft sand. Bob and the old cruiser managed to find every hole and we rip, tear, bash and crash our way through. Anyhow, a short run and we head inland again to try to get to Champagne Pools. Now, a million tourist vehicles jam the car park, so we go up and around to the second. And then we walk down the burning sand and along the equally scorching hot boardwalk to the pools. Look down to see about 100 people swimming, splashing, and generally getting sunburnt, but alas, no champagne. Now, with the tide out, the water washing over the rocks to form the famous bubbles is not there, and we vote to return to the car and push on. Well, we'll come back another day. The track across to Orchard Beach is about 8 kilometres of unbelievably soft sand and single file. Lo and behold, someone is bogged and the entire road is closed until we can get him out. Now, Bob and I quickly turn off under a shady tree and wait for a team of young blokes. Anyhow, they turn up, get him out, then they strut around with their tail feathers up. Well, whatever. Anyhow, we grind on to Orchard Beach and being lunchtime, we vote for a yummy curry pie followed by a Magnum ice cream. There's a grassy airfield and a helipad across the road, no activity there, but a Range Rover is bogged up to the chassis in hot, soft sand. Now, this is first-class entertainment. We sit on the store veranda watching the scurry of helpers getting burnt feet and carry on as we lick away at our ice cream. Anyhow, a few minutes later, we mount the old cruiser and roar through with no trouble at all. Good old cruiser, Bob points out. It's the skill of the driver. I agree, all's good. Anyhow, no luck with the dingo-fenced camping enclosure up on the high ground at Waddy Point, so it's down near the beach, out in the open. Bob and I find a lagoon on the beach. It's about 1 metre deep and probably about 400 metres long, just right to enjoy a saltwater wash. Anyhow, I think we smell better, but there's no real way to tell, is there? Anyhow, on our way back to camp, we spot a couple of dingoes with their cubs, and they've come out on the beach looking for dead fish or birds or whatever else washes in. Anyhow, they look like they're starving. It's no wonder tourists break the law and try to feed them. Anyhow, they ignore us. Monday the 28th, big push today of around 30 kilometres to the northern tip called Sandy Cape and with the old lighthouse up on the ridge. Now, the beach is good, but we must pass 2 bad rock outcrops. These will stop you at anything above half tide. Known as South and North Ngala Rocks. They both have bypasses, but these are notoriously steep and extremely soft. Good thing we got the old cruiser with low pressure tyres and diff locks. Not to mention a skilled driver, Bob reminds me again. Anyhow, the first is South Ngala and has a one-vehicle track winding along the shoreline through the black sandstone to form a canyon that's always full of water. We nickname it the Canyon. It's a real side mirror smashing, diff crunching and sump dragging hazard. Then up a steep, dry, soft sand hill of about 200 metres, then another few hundred metres down the other side to the beach. The sort of place where dozens line up with their cameras to get YouTube footage of all manner of vehicles and drivers trying to show off their capabilities or lack thereof. Do yourself a favour, check it out. Anyhow, we're lined up waiting to get through one at a time and an idiot in a ute screams by past Bob, queue jumping, then proceeds to block the road by getting hopelessly bogged on the steep sandy hill. Great. Now, Bob couldn't see around the corner, so he followed and is committed to the canyon of no return, where he is now blocked on the other uphill side. With mutterings and other unspeakable grunts, we have to just sit and are forced to wait in the base of the hill climb. Anyhow, after about 15 minutes, the turkey ahead manages to get out. Good old Bob sticks the cruiser in low ratio diff lock, gives the old girl a bit of stick, well, a lot of stick really. Sand fans off the tyres in every direction and we lurch forward through rut after rut, grinding up and over to finally hit the hard beach on the other side. "No worries," Bob says with a stupid grin. "That's how it's done." Ah, he's the man. Anyhow, with tail feathers up, we set off for the next set of rocks, the Northern Nagala Rocks. And that has another vehicle deeply buried in the soft sand of the steep bypass track, and we opt to wait for the tide to back off a bit so we can go around the rocky headland. Anyhow, pretty soon the tide has dropped a few more centimetres. We run the gauntlet between receding waves to scoot around, and we're cruising the last 15 kilometres up to the top. Anyhow, rounding the top end, we rotate from the eastern side to the west, and the water changes from surf to calm. We zip past the campers and fishermen on the western side of the island, and we cruise the 10 kilometres down to the lighthouse. Now, the 1.2 kilometre walk looks good, but it's hot and the track seems vertical and only official vehicles allowed. I look around and I've lost Bob. No, there he is talking to someone on the beach. Now I'm waiting and waiting, about 50 metres away under the scattered shade of a she-oak tree and trying to push a hint. No, Bob's still talking. Finally, he breaks away and we start the hot climb. Anyhow, we're 100 metres in, and there is this guy Bob was chin-wagging with, driving up behind us with his wife in a four-wheel drive. "Hey, you blokes want to lift to the top?" "Bet your bottom dollar we do," and we jump in. Turns out this bloke who Bob was making small talk with, Bob's the master of small talk. Anyhow, the bloke he was talking to on the beach is a turtle-watching volunteer who lives in the lighthouse residence. Anyhow, we get out at the top and Bob gives me a lesson about making friends with the right people. It's not what you know, Ross, it's who you know. Good on you, mate. And we enjoy the view. Now, we had to walk down by ourselves as there was only enough friendship to get us to the top, not back down again. Now, I'm about to include a story that if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. I'm trying to paint a picture of a group of young bucks who had been travelling at the same time as us from the same campsite to the top of the island. Now, they'd stopped a few clicks back, so we're about half an hour behind us. Even though the sand was piping hot, they decided to walk the steep track up to the lighthouse. Now, signs at the bottom warn you to wear shoes for such an occasion. But no siree, the sign is obviously for wimps. These dudes are too tough and I think a bit full of terps. They headed up the burning sand with 3 of them wearing thongs and the other barefoot. We met up with them close to the top, stubbies in one hand, running from one tiny bit of shade to another. By now, 2 of them had decided to share the one pair of thongs. They would run for 20 or 30 metres, then change feet. Somehow, their logic was burn one, rest one. We shake our heads in disbelief and continue down. Hormones and beer seem to make young men do strange things, Bob mutters. Anyhow, towards the bottom, we spot a sign saying 600 metres to World War II radar installation bunkers and graves. Anyhow, curiosity sucked us in and away we went. Well, it was a bit more like 1,000 metres, I reckon, but we eventually found the site as stated. The bunker, being in a gully, must have been the accommodation and protection. The radar would have had to have been up on high ground somewhere close by. Who knows? Anyhow, afternoon low tide allowed us to drive on the beach around the troublesome rocky headlands, and we cruised back to base camp at Waddy Point. We both crashed out on a tarp spread on the sand under the shade of a she-oak tree for a grandpa nap. Anyhow, half an hour later, Bob decides to fill the water jerry cans, and it's about 200 metres to the camp watering point. So being slack, he tosses them in the car, rolls down the road to the tap. As he's doing so, around the corner, off the beach, seemingly out of nowhere, come the boys in blue. "Where's your seatbelt, mate?" with an aggressive stare as they begin the process of booking him. Now, over the years, Bob has had a knack of putting a burr under their saddle, but on this occasion it was late in the afternoon, and like us, they'd had enough excitement for one day and let him slip away with a warning. So, Beelzebub Blues gets added to our list of adversaries on the island. Evening meal is always a bit of a mixed bag. Tonight it's spaghetti and meatballs for a base and a can of baked beans, a packet of soup, that's whatever comes to hand, then noodles from an instant noodle packet. "We don't want to ruin the exotic flavour," says Bob, so the noodle flavour satchel is tossed in the bin. Then as much pepper as the dish can sustain. It's mixed in a saucepan until piping hot and served in 2 bowls. You might think that's the end product, but no siree. I get a packet of potato chips and scrunch them on the top. We've got to add texture, I say, and Chef Bob quickly agrees. By now it's dark, and being a ban on fires on the island, we don't risk a candle, and somebody had forgotten the camp lantern, so our miners' lights are strapped to our heads. They flash their beams around as we scoop the delicious stew from our bowls. It doesn't get any better than this, I say. Bob agrees, adding a sneeze as the pepper hits its mark. Interaction with the other explorers was often humorous. The previous mentioned hot sand dancing blokes who had travelled up to the tip with us in convoy style gave us the call sign Dad's Army, and we referred to them as young bucks on the CBs. It was good having 2 vehicles looking out for each other. However, they had knocked back an esky full of cordial, the VB flavour. And by the time we got home, they were 3 sheets to the wind. Fortunately, they were smart enough to have a designated driver. Anyhow, they gave us a hearty invitation for a cordial after tea, but wisdom whispered in our ear, leave them to it. Anyhow, they were all dead to the world, snoring away in their swags within the hour. Poor little tykes. It's been a big day for them, Bob comments. Speaking of being dead, the other arvo, Bob wanders off somewhere and I sit back with my cap over my eyes and nod off to sleep in the shade. Sometime later, I'm half awake when I hear Bob's footsteps come up beside me. I'm just relaxed with my cap over my face and he reaches down to check my pulse. He's come back, sees me not moving and thinks I might have carked it. Without moving, I mumble from under my cap, I'm still alive. Oh, thank God, he says, because I forgot to bring body bags. We enjoy a laugh and the life of 2 old buggers goes on. Tuesday the 29th. This is the final day on Fraser with a long drive to the southern end, Hook Point, and onto the barge at around 4, we reckon. Okay. Low tide is at 2:30, so we should have a great run. But first it's high tide and the call of champagne pools is beckoning. Now these pools are given the name because at high tide the waves push water over the unusually pitted rocks and form millions of tiny bubbles in the 2 deep pools on the lee side. Bob recalls Myrtle saying, it's like bathing in shampoo. Oh well, she'd know. I'll just have to take her word for it. It's beyond my pay grade. Anyhow, the pools are only about 10 kilometres away, but the track is rough, boggy, hot, fine sand that weaves in and out of the bush. It'll take us about an hour. Breakfast and pack up becomes the silent order and the 2 of us move to a now finely tuned choreographic routine like dancers on a stage. No, not tutus and tights. Come on, fair crack of the whip. But here we are, 2 experienced campers working as one against all that nature can throw at us. Then it rains. The camping gods are just trying to mess with us, Bob says, and we soldier on. Myrtle will have to dry out our tents before she stores them away when we get home, quips Bob with an air of lordship. Once again, I reckon the lad doesn't have enough health insurance to cover the pain he's going to receive when he tries to make that demand on Myrtle. Oh, God. Moving on. Up to the shop at Orchard Beach to fuel up. At $2.30 a litre, we only add 30, but the freezer with a double choc caramel magnum gets us and we indulge. They're supposed to be ice creams, but by the time they pack all that chocolate and caramel, there's only a slither of ice cream on the stick. Oh, we don't complain. We're the first to arrive at the unusually empty car park right on high tide. With towel, camera, water bottles and sunscreen, we head down the boardwalk for a refreshing plunge into the bubbles. Now, within 10 minutes, the place is swarming with busloads of young backpackers from a dozen different language groups, some dressed and others, well, let's just say they're likely to be sunburned in unusual places. Anyhow, Bob and I are probably the only ones over 40. Admittedly, only a little over. But we are noticeable by being the only ones on our hands and knees to get over the small rocks close to the shore without stumbling. Anyhow, an hour later, we are grinding out of the soft sand of Indian Heads and point south toward the bakery at Eurong for a familiar hot pie. We glide past Dundubra, cathedrals and pinnacles with the majestic spires of coloured sands of reds, white, yellows, blacks and browns. We also dodged the tourists at the rusting Mahino Wreck and Eli Creek, Happy Valley, Yidney Rocks and walking track at Lake Wabi. A commotion on the beach up ahead turns out to be a car and caravan being towed by 3 four-wheelers that are all snatch-strapped together, huffing and puffing to get a van pulled out of the sand at the beach exit to Euron. Bob and I ponder why anyone would attempt to haul a large van up through the 200 metres of very soft sand, because there's nowhere to go from Euron except miles and miles of more soft sand bush tracks. And believe me, we have spent the last few days grinding along them with low-pressure tyres, constant four-wheel drive, low ratios, traction off, and occasionally diff lock. Oh well, we wait for a few minutes and all the gung-ho, macho guys have the monster tamed and out of the bog. As they walk around their trophy, egos pumped and chest out, congratulating themselves, we slam the old cruiser into D for drive, kick the horses, and all 4 wheels throw a plume of hot sand in the air as we power around the spectators and head up the access road to our favourite island bakery for a pepper steak pie. That's how it's done, says Bob. Now he is strutting around with tail feathers up. Oh, get the man a pie before he starts signing autographs. Anyhow, an hour later, we're back on the beach encountering the tag-along tourists. Now, these usually consist of about 3 or 4 vehicles, all packed full of young people and following a lead vehicle, all painted the same colours of the operator and are under instructions to keep a tight line as they cruise at about 60 kilometres an hour. Now, for a bit of fun, we catch up and join on the end of the daisy chain. The lead driver decides he's had enough of this mug following his group, slows right down and steers the Caterpillar towards the edge of the surf. Bob takes the hint and accelerates past on the right. We smile and wave as we gently glide by and continue on toward the common destination of all southbound traffic, the barge at Hook Point. Oh, lining up on the beach at Hook Point, Bob says 4 o'clock, right on time. Oh no, the old schedule manager is back on duty. Anyhow, half an hour later, we are lumbering along the hard black sand, otherwise known as bitumen, and with low-pressure tyres is to be fought with danger of rolling a tyre off. Anyhow, without mishap, we make the 10 or so kilometres to Rainbow Beach, servo, and pump the tyres up, fill the tank, and cruise down the Bruce to a real hot shower and food at Bob and Myrtle's place at Caboolture. All's good. Well, Wednesday the 30th. Hey, let's check out the beach camping on northeast side of Bribie Islands, says Bob. Good idea, Myrtle and I chorus together. So we've only been home for 12 hours and Myrtle's looking for peace and quiet again. Now, first we have a bit of car problem to sort out. Last night, a burning smell like clutch pads and metal was wafting through the cab as we were coming around the roundabout just a few clicks up the road, and the air conditioner had stopped. Sure enough, the compressor bearing is stuffed. Cut the aircon compressor belt and we're good to go. Good old bush mechanic skills. Anyhow, Bob repacks the car. Myrtle and I tactfully leave him to it. That way he knows where everything is and we don't get the blame for it missing. We go and have a coffee while he packs it twice, belts and braces. Anyhow, water, gas, some tucker, and Bribie Island, here we come. Low tide's at 4 p.m, so let's hit the beach before then. We'll try with fully inflated tyres, comes the word. We grind and bump through the most horrendous kilometre of access road ever. Then finally the blue surf is before us and only 50 metres of soft sand to the hard stuff. With a she'll be right mate attitude, we plough into the final obstacle when the chassis and the fuel tanks are sitting on the ground and all 4 wheels are spinning in powder. You have to swallow your pride and say, we're parked. So I just thought we would stop here for a bit and admire the scenery, I asked Bob. Guess so, comes a curt reply. Okay, time to get out the recovery tracks that Myrtle and son Philip had the foresight to give Bob on his last birthday. Dig out the sand, lower the tyre pressure, place the tracks, stick the old cruiser in low ratio diff lock on and reverse gear and put a mean-looking Bob behind the wheel. What could go wrong? Absolutely nothing. Textbook extraction. Reversing 15 or so metres and slam into forward gear to rip over the soft stuff into it with the greatest of ease. I'm so glad you brought those recovery tracks, Myrtle and Philip. Of course, it goes without saying, if no one saw us bogged and we have no photos of it, did we really get bogged? After all, no one would be stupid enough to try and drive on soft, powdery sand without deflating the tyres. Ah, such is life. Anyhow, a drink of water, wind in our hair, surf to the right, sandhills to the left, and we screamed north, leaving the embarrassment of being bogged as a distant memory. We reckoned we wanted to get bogged just to demonstrate our recovery skills and try out the new and unused tracks. We give ourselves 10 plus and look for campsite number 6. This will be our home for the next 2 nights on Bribie. Well, we might have had to contend with blood-sucking flies, coppers and snakes and dingoes on Fraser, but here we have the Bribie wild turkeys. Now, Bob's on his knees trying to do something in his tent, head down, backside hanging out, when he's bitten on the rump by 2 turkeys trying to get into his tent. Oh, he's so popular. Anyhow, he had a few choice words to say that must have been in turkey lingo because they immediately understood and bolted for the scrub. Now, finally, in a place where we can have a fire pit and the park rangers provide the pit, but no wood, and you're not allowed to collect on the island. Good thing Bob remembered to get Myrtle to load up some firewood before we left home. He reckons if she were here, he would just have to suggest and she would diligently get up and put another log on the fire. Reminds me of that hillbilly song of Tomple Glasser, who, look it up sometime. Anyhow, the lad's been married for over 50 years. You think he might have learned something about women by now. Oh, Lord spare me. Well, Thursday the 31st of October. The main shipping channel for Brisbane comes very close to this part of Bribie, and all night and day there is a procession of large ships coming and going. I was sure I could hear the rhythmic throbbing of a large cargo ship as it passed by early in the night. Tell him he's dreaming. Anyhow, about 4:30 this morning, I staggered out of my tent to the side of a huge cruise boat, possibly one of the Carnival cruise liners, steaming by with all deck lights ablaze like a floating town full of partying people heading to Brisbane. Probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars, I could hear the ghost of Johnny Cash say. Anyhow, day breaks and the routine of Weet-Bix and canned fruit took a bad turn this morning when Chef Bob discovered that we'd eaten all the fruit and we're left with an alternative choice of spaghetti and meatballs or baked beans to go with the Weet-Bix. But then he discovered one last can of creamed rice. Oh, ripper. That was delicious. Anyhow, I still followed up with the baked beans and a cup of tea. Anyhow, turkeys are still trying to dominate our campsite. Blood-sucking march flies still wanting to die by attacking us. Oh, we oblige. It's full-on war. Lazy day watching the tide come and go. We thought about a swim, but too many blue bottles and other jelly things, so a 5-kilometre cruise up the beach and we come to the World War II gun emplacements and the Channel Mine Control Centre. This was used to prevent enemy submarines using the channel. Anyhow, the deep water channel comes right in close to this part of Bribie, and these old concrete monsters were built in the 1940s and were up in the sand dunes, but are now breaking apart as they squat on the beach and are washed by the high tide. Bob and I have got used to living in the same space by now. He wanders about and does his stuff, and I do mine. We double up a few times, like I'd make him a cup of tea, put his sugar in and stir it, then he'd come along and re-sugar and stir. Sweet ass, bro. I leave him long enough, he gets through it. Look out, the turkeys are attacking, ripping our rubbish bag to pieces. Bob talks their language, so has a little chat once again, and they rip off into the scrub. Now, our nearest neighbour, about 100 metres along the beach, says that they've been constantly harassed by sand goannas. Oh, God, the wild Australian bush. Next we'll have drop bears and yowies. Anyhow, time for some exquisite noodles and a campfire as the gentle sea breeze murmurs in the she-oaks and cools the atmosphere. Another huge ship glides by, northward along the channel to some exotic destination, and twilight envelops us. Well, Friday the 1st, Ocean Beach, Bribie Island, 5 a.m. Tide's rising and we need to get out or risk ploughing for kilometres in soft powder sand. And the well-oiled machine of Bob and Ross slips into gear and the camp is racked, stacked and packed, leaving only footprints. We cruise south along the hard beach sand, playing dodge 'em with a dozen super large jellyfish washed up from last night's tide. Well, Macca's for breakfast, suggests Bob, and the committee of 2 vote yes. 8:30, hot showers and smoky 3-day-old camp clothes in the washing machine, and the good old boys and island adventure is over. Bob and Ross are still good mates. A good friend listens to your adventures, but a best friend makes them with you. I made this adventure into a 10-part YouTube series with video clips added. Search YouTube for Fraser and Bribie, 2 Men, 2 Islands by Ross Taylor, and enjoy.
This is the end of the book called Adventures. You may like to check out his other 2 books in this Baby Boomer series, Early Years and Ministry Years. Early Years covers the first 40 years of his life through his early childhood and onto his working life as a telecommunications technician in radio and television broadcasting. Also, his involvement as a reserve military officer, his marriage and children. As a baby boomer, he has witnessed the first men on the moon, the change from steam to electric trains and magnetophones to mobiles, and this book records his adventures navigating these changes. Ministry Years is the second part of the autobiography trilogy of his life journey, and is about his Christian conversion experience in December 1978, at the age of 31. He recounts numerous experiences as a minister of religion in Mackay, Townsville, Bega and Ingham, and recounts a number of extraordinary events along the way. The written format for all these books can be obtained from Apple Books on your Apple device, or Kobo app on your Android device. Just search for Ross Taylor and enjoy. Let me tell you about the author, Ross Taylor. He arrived into the world in 1947, and, as a result, became part of the generation known as the Baby Boomers. He was born to a working-class family in Ipswich, Queensland, Australia, to a father who worked as a cabinet maker and coach builder for the railways. Ross's mother's full-time job was raising him and his 3 sisters, Joy and Annette, who were older, and Judith the youngest. The first 15 years of Ross's life was devoted to education, the next 30 years as a radio and television technician with the PMG, then the past 30 years as a minister of religion. Just like everyone else, he had numerous add-on branches, twists, and turns on his journey of life. In the 70s, he was trained as an infantry officer with the reserve forces. Then in the 80s he completed Bible college. Throughout his life he participated in several project management roles in building television stations, church and school buildings. He also directed a number of community support organizations. Ross and his wife Diane currently live in Townsville, Queensland. They have 3 children, Robert, Greg and Roslyn, who are all married and living their own journeys. Their 8 grandchildren are well on their way to adulthood. Ross reveals, "I am smiling at the future and trying to enjoy retirement, although the call of the wild is still whispering, what's next?"